everybody. It's your best friend Kenny, and we are back with another entry in my Iceberg series. This is the Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things Iceberg by Juan the Pickle. We are starting on Tier 4 today, which means we go deeper and deeper into the iceberg chart. Now we're talking about disturbing things, unsolved mysteries that are hard to find. A lot of people don't know about this stuff. A lot of the research has been hard on some of these things because there isn't a lot of info out there. So we're breaking new ground here, and I'm excited to get going. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. If you have some spooky or disturbing stories you want me to research, send me an email at thespookylawyer@gmail.com. Emails are coming in. We're getting all sorts of interesting stories, and I'm in the process of working on those. But for today, let's get spooky. Charlie Nooface. Charlie Nooface is a legend from Pennsylvania, and it originates about a boy or a man named Raymond Robinson, who was born on October 29th, 1910, in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. I assume they have beavers in Beaver County, Pennsylvania. If they don't, it's false advertising. When Raymond was 8 years old, he was playing with friends near a trolley bridge in Beaver Falls when he tried to climb an electrical pole. He was electrocuted, resulting in severe burns and the loss of his eyes, nose, and right arm. After the incident, he had to be under his family care for his entire life, and he lived with relatives in Coppell, Pennsylvania. He actually found a way to make money making doormats and leather wallets to sell to locals. He avoided the public due to his appearance, so he would go for long walks during the night because he believed it would get him less attention at night. People would drive along the road. He preferred to drive around a Route 351, and people would drive around Route 351 hoping to catch a glimpse of what they called Charlie Nooface. Despite this intrusive and sort of demeaning curiosity, Raymond was reportedly kind to those he talked to and would often accept cigarettes or small talk with those who approached him. In his later years, Raymond lived at the Beaver County Geriatric Center, and he passed away on June 11th, 1985 at the age of 74. This is sort of an interesting story because, this is an urban legend, but it's one of the urban legends that are sort of based on a real person or real story. So it's not as exaggerated as an urban legend. This was a real guy. He existed. And unfortunately, because of a tragic accident he was in, he had this appearance that made him a local legend. And he seemed to be in a pretty okay place mentally with it if he was able to be kind to people who were, sort of treating him like something to gawk at. The Circleville Letters. The Circleville Letters are a mystery that has haunted the small town of Circleville, Ohio for decades. Starting in 1977, residents began receiving anonymous, threatening letters filled with accusations of affairs, corruption, and even murder. These letters terrorized the community and remain largely unsolved to this day. The letters were addressed to specific individuals and contained highly personal information about their lives, including alleged secrets and scandals. Many letters contained threats of violence or harm if the recipients didn't comply with the writer's demands. While many residents received letters, the writer seemed particularly fixated on Mary Gillespie, a school bus driver, and Gordon Massey, the the school superintendent, accusing them of having an affair. In 1977, the first letters appeared, targeting various residents and businesses in Circleville. Ron Gillespie, Mary's husband, died in a single-car accident in 1977 under suspicious circumstances, while receiving letters of accusing his wife of infidelity. In 1983, Mary Gillespie found a booby-trapped sign with a loaded gun aimed at her school bus route. The gun was traced to her brother-in-law, Paul Freshour, who was convicted of attempted murder. Between 1983 and 1994, despite Freshour's imprisonment, the letters continue, even being sent from different locations. In 1994, Freshour was released from prison, and the letters abruptly stopped. There are several theories about who could have written these letters. First, Paul Freshour. While he was convicted for the booby trap, many doubt he was the sole author due to the letters continuing during his incarceration. Mary Gillespie. Some suspect she may have been involved either as a writer or in collaboration with someone else, perhaps to frame Freshour. It's also possible that these were multiple writers were involved in this and sending the letters, especially given the long time frame and different handwriting styles. People wonder who was behind the Circleville letters. What was the writer's motivation for terrorizing the town for so many years? Was the death of Ron Gillespie truly an accident, or was he murdered as the letters suggested? I don't know if that Simpsons episode is based on this, this Circleville Letters thing, but it really sounds familiar. You know, the one I'm talking about, I think it was part of the Treehouse of Horrors. And, my favorite part was the kids would be like talking in like fake British accents, and, they'd be like talking on the radio, and they'd be like, and we have more about Homer Simpson. Again, I don't know if this took inspiration from that, but it sounds very, very much like it. As to who did this, who knows? This kind of sounds like stuff that would happen on Facebook before Facebook, right? And it's kind of funny to think that this kind of garbage happened, even in the 80s. Like, this sort of stuff has happened before. People with anonymous accounts trying to harass people. People are sending anonymous letters to people. This one is particularly juicy, though. The Isdal Woman. The Isdal Woman is a Cold War era mystery. In November 1970, a badly burned body of an unidentified woman was found in the Isdalen Valley, Ice Valley, in Bergen, Norway. The circumstances surrounding her death were strange, and despite decades of investigation, her identity and the cause of her death is unknown. Here's what we know. November 29th, 1970, a university professor and his two young daughters discovered the body in a remote area of Isdalen. The body was badly burned, and many of the identifying labels on her belongings had been removed. She was found lying on her back with her arms crossed, which is not a typical position for a self-unaliving or an accidental death. Police investigated. They found numerous items near the body, including suitcases, wigs, a coded diary, and a prescription bottle with a fake name on it. It's believed that she may have used several aliases. She may have traveled frequently and stayed a lot around the Bergen area. Despite efforts, including facial reconstruction, authorities have been unable to identify her. The cause of her death was a combination of carbon monoxide poisoning and a possible barbiturate overdose. But whether it was self-unaliving or not remains uncertain. Now, there's some theories, given the fact that this happened during the Cold War, that she was a spy. The use of multiple identities, what appears to be frequent traveling. She was found in an area close to military installations, and this sort of supports this theory. It's also possible that she had been in witness protection and was fleeing some sort of danger. There have been some recent developments. In 2016, there was isotope analysis of her teeth, which indicated she likely grew up in or around Nuremberg, Germany. In 2017, there was DNA analysis, which confirmed her European ancestry and further supported the isotope analysis. But again, who was she? Why was she in Bergen? Why was she traveling around so much? Why did she have all these assumed identities? What happened to her? No one knows. This kind of sounds like a movie. This kind of sounds like a Cold War movie, and I'm sure there's a fascinating story behind this. But whenever I see these stories about, some body that's found and no one knows who it is, it makes me sad. It's sad to think that this person, has loved ones that have no idea what happened to her. The Eileen Moore Lighthouse Keepers. The Eileen Moore Lighthouse Keepers are unexplained disappearances. In December 1900, 3 keepers vanished without a trace from the Flallan Isles Lighthouse on Eileen Moor, a remote island off the coast of Scotland. The Eileen Moor is the largest of the 7 Flallan Isles located in the Outer Hebrides. The lighthouse was newly built at the time, perched on a high cliff, and exposed to the harsh elements of the Atlantic Ocean. The island is remote and difficult to access, especially during the rough winter. The 3 keepers who disappeared are named James Ducat, who was the principal keeper, Thomas Marshall, who was the second assistant, and Donald MacArthur, which is known as the occasional keeper. December 15th, 1900 was the last known entry in the lighthouse logbook. In December 26, 1900, the relief vessel, the Hesperus, arrived and found the lighthouse completely deserted. There was no sign of struggle. The lighthouse was in order, but there was no sign of the keepers. Their coats were still hanging, and the table was set for a meal. That happens so often where people have the table set for a meal. Like people are like cooking or about to cook, and then all of a sudden they disappear. Now, there's been investigations into this, obviously. The lighthouse logbook contains some unusual entries leading up to the disappearance, mentioning strong storms and unusual anxieties. Although these entries have been questioned for their authenticity. Again, they don't know if these entries are true. Despite a thorough search of the island and surrounding waters, no bodies have been found, and no definitive explanation for their disappearances have ever been established. There are some theories as to what might have happened. One is a rogue wave. A giant rogue wave may have swept the keepers off the cliffs while they were working outside. Oh, at least that would be quick. Storms. The logbook entries mention severe storms, and it's possible they were swept away or drowned while trying to secure equipment. Foul play. Although there is a lack of any evidence of foul play, some have speculated that there was maybe a conflict between the keepers or some other sort of foul play. And of course, given the remote and isolated location, there are theories of paranormal activity, ghosts, sea monsters, or aliens. Now, personally, I want to think that this was Nessie that did this. This was Nessie's revenge. Nessie went all the way. I know Loch Ness is nowhere near these islands, but maybe Nessie or a couple relatives ran over there, snatched these people out of the lighthouse, and went back to Loch Ness. But as you guys know, I'm a big fan of Nessie. So, Nessie's one of those things I always want. Maybe Nessie and Cthulhu were working together. Nessie and Cthulhu were in cahoots. Okay, I'll stop. Okay, I lied. I'm never going to stop talking about Nessie and Cthulhu. The dawn is your enemy. The dawn is your enemy is a phrase associated with a series of sign-off bumpers that the late-night television programming block of Adult Swim used to air between 2005 and 2010. These bumpers were short, surreal, unsettling segments that were played during the transition from Adult Swim back to Cartoon Network in the early morning hours. People found this creepy. The dawn is your enemy is an ominous statement, an ominous phrase. In theory, Adult Swim would transition back to Cartoon Network at dawn, so it sort of made sense in this context. The accompanying visuals were often minimalistic but unsettling. A common image was a still photograph of a desolate landscape with a looming sun in the background. Sometimes the sun would even appear to wink, adding to the creepiness. The background music was often eerie and discordant, further enhancing the unsettling atmosphere. Now, of course, Cartoon Network and Adult Swim has never officially explained the bumpers. But, Cartoon Network and Adult Swim are weird on purpose all the time. That's part of their thing. There's some theories that the purpose of this bumper was intended to frighten young children who might have been staying up late watching Adult Swim. Another theory is that the bumpers were simply a branding tactic to reinforce Adult Swim image as edgy and unconventional. Adult Swim was known for absurdist humor, and the bumpers could be seen as an extension of that. Now, I think that's probably the most likely thing. This was just as the internet was sort of becoming what we know it to be. 2005 was when YouTube started. So I'm sure, or around the time that YouTube started. So I'm sure that the idea behind this was Adult Swim just trying to be as weird as possible because that was their thing. Killing Stone. The Killing Stone, or the Sesho Psyche, I'm sure I murdered that in Japanese, is a volcanic rock located in the Nasu Highlands of the Tochigi Prefecture in Japan. It is a local legend and emits a poisonous gas. According to Japanese mythology, the Killing Stone is a transformed corpse of Temomo no Mei, a beautiful woman who is actually a nine-tailed fox spirit in disguise. She was a powerful and evil entity who plotted to kill Emperor Toba and overthrow the government. She was eventually hunted down and killed by the warrior Mura no Suki. Her spirit, however, remained and her body turned into the Killing Stone, which emitted the poisonous fumes that killed everything that touched it. A Buddhist priest named Jeno eventually confronted the spirit and, through exorcism and prayers, convinced it to find peace. Now, in reality, the Killing Stone is located in an area with volcanic activity, and the sulfurous gases it releases are toxic. This natural phenomenon likely contributed to the development of the legend. In March 2022, the Killing Stone split in two, causing quite a stir. Many people believe that the spirit of Tomano no Mei had been released. While scientists attributed the split to a natural weathering and freezing, the event renewed interest in the legend and drew many visitors to the site. The Killing Stone is, today, a popular tourist attraction. It's roped off to prevent people from touching it and inhaling the toxic gases. But, some people are still trying to get in there and, smell this toxic thing, right? The area surrounding the stone is considered sacred ground, and visitors can find a small shrine nearby. The Killing Stone has inspired numerous works of art, literature, and theater in Japan, and the story continues to fascinate and intrigue people with its blend of history, mythology, and natural phenomenon. It's most likely that this is just a, natural occurrence, and it's cool. The local legend around it is cool. I think it's nice. I like the legend, but it's a legend. Rat Kings. A rat king is a phenomenon where a group of rats have their tails intertwined and become fused together, which creates a horrifying mass of rodents that are unable to separate and must move as one. Why does this happen? Well, people don't know. There are several theories as to why this happens. Tangled tails. Young rats with their flexible tails might get tangled together in materials like hair, nesting materials, or sticky substances like sap or gum. As they grow, their tails become intertwined and eventually fused. It's believed that possibly in colder climates, rats may huddle together for warmth and their tails could become frozen together. This is a rare occurrence, and there are only a handful of documented cases throughout history. Now, I've also read, when I was researching this, I've also heard that this is a hoax. So it's sort of up to you what you want to believe. You know, whether this is just a hoax, whether this is something that just had sort of happened, you know, once or twice. Scientists are skeptical about the existence of rat kings. And they believe that most of the historical cases are either hoaxes or misinterpretations. But there are preserved specimens in museums around the world, and there have been some documented instances, including some captured on video. For example, in 2021, a farmer in Estonia discovered a rat king consisting of 13 rats. Also in 2021, in Russia, a rat king was found in a veterinary clinic. These recent examples make me hope that this is a natural occurring phenomenon and not just some disgusting thing that somebody is doing to rats, you know, for internet points or internet whatever. But also this is pretty gross. Jennifer Fairgate. In 1995, Jennifer Fairgate, under an alias, checked into the Isdal Hotel in Norway, and she was found dead in her room just days later. Despite investigation, her identity and the circumstances surrounding her death are unknown. Here's what we know. On May 31st, 1995, a woman checked into the Oslo Plaza Hotel under the name Jennifer Fairgate. She was described as elegant and well-dressed, around 30 years old, with shoulder-length dark hair. Hotel staff noticed she was acting unusual. She carried no luggage initially and only had a small handbag. She requested a specific room facing the royal palace. She was very quiet and rarely interacted with the staff. She paid for her room in cash. Later, a suitcase arrived for her containing clothes and toiletries, but with all labels and identifying marks meticulously removed. On June 3rd, 1995, the hotel staff found Jennifer Fairgate dead in her room, lying on her back in the bed with a gunshot wound to her forehead. A 9mm Browning pistol was found in her hand, but there were no fingerprints on it, not even hers. She had no identification, no passport, no driver's license, or any other form of identification in the room or among her belongings. Despite investigation by Norwegian police, including international inquiries and facial reconstruction attempts, they've been unable to determine her identity. So who was she? Again, like some of the previous ones that we've discussed in this series, like I said, it's sad that no one knows who this person was. It definitely seems to me like this could be another one of these cases of sort of foul play, or that this was some sort of political or spy individual or someone who was on the run. There's been theories that, like I said, she might have been a spy, she might have been involved in organized crime, or that there have been other reasons that she was trying to disappear. The Saggaya family massacre. The Saggaya family massacre is an unsolved crime from Japan. On December 30th, 2000, a family of 4 was brutally massacred in their home in the Saggaya ward of Tokyo. The killer not only committed this horrible crime, but remained in the house for several hours afterward, leaving behind a lot of evidence, and yet managed to escape without a trace. The victims were Mikio Miyazawa, a father, and a businessman who worked for a British company. Yasuko Miyazawa, the mother, and a part-time tutor. Nina Miyazawa, who was 8 at the time, an elementary school student, and Rai Miyazawa, who was 6 and a kindergartner. On the morning of December 31st, 2000, Yasuko's mother discovered the bodies after being unable to reach the family. Mikio was found stabbed to death near the stairs, and Yasuko was found stabbed in her bedroom. The killer remained in the house for hours after the murder, eating ice cream, using the family computer, and even taking a nap. It's kind of like the murderer version of Goldilocks, right? The killer left behind a lot of evidence, including fingerprints were found throughout the house, including on the murder weapon, which was a sashimi knife from the family's kitchen. Bloody footprints were found, suggesting the killer wore a size 28 centimeter or an approximately 10.5 US size shoe. The killer left behind a bloodstained sweatshirt, a hat, gloves, and a hip bag containing sand that was later traced to a US military base in Okinawa. The police launched a massive investigation, interviewed thousands of people, and have followed up on countless leads. The case has even garnered international attention, and authorities sought assistance from Interpol and other agencies. Despite the evidence, the killer's identity remains a mystery. Some speculate that the killer may have had a connection to organized crime and that it was perhaps a hit gone wrong or a revenge killing. Others believe it might have been a personal grudge. The killer may have had a personal vendetta against the family, although no clear motive has been established. Another theory is it was just a random act of violence, which is chilling. Now, this was before, since this was in 2000, this was before there were cameras everywhere. This was before everyone had cell phones in their pockets. This is before there was all this way to catch sort of criminals doing this stuff. And, it's sort of wild that it feels like this happened recently, but really this occurrence happened in another time. And that's why this person was able to get away with this. You couldn't do what this person did today. There would be camera footage from every house people drove by. There would be, surveillance footage everywhere. There would be cell phone pings. They would get you right away. And it's sort of wild to think that, that's how much our society has changed in just, a few decades. Unsinkable Sam. Unsinkable Sam was a ship's cat who served on 3 different warships during World War II. Remarkably, he survived the sinking of all 3 ships, which earned his nickname Unsinkable Sam. He was originally named Oscar and served on the German battleship Bismarck. Now, I don't know why we're considering these cats serving, but sure. After the Bismarck sank, he was rescued and served on the British destroyer, the HMS Cossack. When the Cossack was sunk, he was rescued again and served on the aircraft carrier, the HMS Ark Royal. The Ark Royal was torpedoed, and Sam survived once more. Personally, I think Sam might have been bad luck for those ships, but good luck for a cat. The 1970 monkey head experiment. I don't like this stuff. I don't like people being mean to animals. These were experiments where a doctor would transplant one monkey's head onto another monkey's body. I'm sure that there are scientific reasons for doing so. I just don't like thinking about it. Supposedly, these experiments were performed by Dr. Robert Wright, who was a neurosurgeon, and supposedly the transplanted head was able to see, hear, and even bite. Robert Liston. Robert Liston was a 19th century Scottish surgeon known for his speed and skill in an era before anesthesia. Now, I don't want a surgeon that's known for his speed. Skill, yeah. Speed, no. He was renowned for his amputations which he could perform in under 30 seconds. Again, I think 30 seconds is too short for an amputation. I don't think that's a good thing. I think an amputation should probably take longer than 30 seconds. He also pioneered new surgical techniques and invented surgical instruments. However, he was known for his high mortality rate, due in part to the lack of sterile techniques he took at the time. I'm shocked. I'm shocked the guy that is speed running amputations had a high mortality rate and wasn't the best at cleaning. In one famous case, Liston reportedly amputated the fingers of his assistant while performing a leg amputation. Both the patient and the assistant later died of an infection, and a spectator reportedly died of shock, resulting in a 300% mortality rate for the operation. That's not a good rate. You don't want to have a 300% mortality rate for your operations. You don't want to have a 100%. You certainly don't want to have a 300%. Otto Warbeer. Otto Warbeer was an American college student who was arrested in North Korea in 2016 for allegedly attempting to steal a propaganda poster. He was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor, and while in custody, he suffered a severe neurological injury that left him in a coma. He was released back to the United States in 2017, but died shortly after. The mystery here is what was the injury? The North Korean government claims he contracted botulism, but U.S. doctors found no evidence of this. And his death has sparked outrage and condemnation of the North Korean regime. As if they need any more outrage or condemnation directed towards them. Oh, again, this is horrible. He suffered some sort of injury, and the belief is he was likely tortured and experimented on, which caused him this awful condition that left him in a coma. Vladimir Komarov. Vladimir Komarov was a Soviet cosmonaut who became the first person to die during a spaceflight. I've always liked the term cosmonaut. I don't know the difference between a cosmonaut and an astronaut, or if they're the same thing, but I think cosmonaut is a cooler term. Komarov was born on March 16th, 1927 in Moscow. He joined the Soviet Air Force at 15 and became a pilot in 1949. He graduated from the Zhukovsky Air Force Engineering Academy. In 1959, Komarov was selected to be part of the first Soviet cosmonaut team. And he became a key contributor to space vehicle design, cosmonaut training, and evaluation. In October 1964, Komarov commanded Voskhod 1, which was the first spaceflight to carry more than one crew member. This made him a national hero. Soyuz 1 was Komarov's second spaceflight, which was in April 1967. However, the mission was plagued with technical issues. Despite these issues, Komarov was ordered to proceed. During the Soyuz 1 mission, multiple systems failed, including the navigation system, the solar panels, and finally, the parachute system. Komarov's capsule crashed into the ground after re-entry, killing him instantly. He was 40 years old. That just seems bad. It seems, but I get that is sort of a risk when you go into space. See, I'm not interested in going into space. I know you've got like all these people, these billionaires who want to go to space. And a few years ago, you had the guy from NSYNC who was going to go to space. I feel like I don't want to go to space. Too easy for something bad to happen up to you out there. And I'm going to stay here. All right. You want to go? Go. You want to come hang with me here? Hang with me here. The Yellowstone Hot Springs deaths. Yellowstone National Park is famous for its stunning geothermal features, including geysers and hot springs. However, these geysers and hot springs can be extremely deadly. There have been numerous deaths and injuries related to these hot springs. The hot springs can reach temperatures exceeding 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Falling into one can cause severe burns, often leading to death. You're basically sous videing yourself. Many hot springs are also highly acidic, capable of dissolving flesh and bone. The ground around these hot springs can be thin and fragile, which can lead to unexpected collapses and falls. Oh, tourists, man. In 2016, a young man tragically died after slipping into a hot spring while trying to hot pot, which is illegally soaking in the thermal feature. His body was dissolved in the acidic water before it could be removed. Don't do this. Don't go outside of the bounds of where you're supposed to go at Yellowstone, man. In 2022, a 70-year-old man died after falling into a hot spring at the West Thumb Geyser Basin. And, I feel like, I don't know if it's the type of thing where you just hear about more of this stuff because of social media, or if people just keep doing this stuff because they see it on social media. But you should not mess with nature. You should not go in something that people who are smarter than you, people who know this stuff better than you, tell you not to go in. Park rangers know their park better than you do. Don't go hot potting. Don't jump into a thermal area. Don't go into something just because it's hot and think, oh no, you can go sit in a hot tub. Go sit in a hot tub if you want to sit in warm water, or a bath. Go sit in the bath. Bad things can still happen to you there, but it probably won't be this bad. The surrogate mother experiment and the ape and the child experiment. This refers to experiments conducted by Harry Harlow in the 1950s and 60s. He explored the importance of maternal attachment and contact comfort in rhesus monkeys using surrogate mothers. Here's how the experiment worked. Harlow separated infant rhesus monkeys from their biological mothers shortly after birth. He then introduced them to two types of artificial surrogate mothers. A wire mother, which was a surrogate made of wire mesh and had a bottle attached to provide food, and a cloth mother. The surrogate mother was made of soft terry cloth but did not provide food. Harlow observed that the infant monkeys overwhelmingly preferred the cloth mother, even though it did not provide nourishment. They would cling to the cloth mother for comfort and security, especially when frightened or stressed. This demonstrated that contact comfort and emotional bonding were more crucial for development than simply providing food. Now I've heard of this experiment a lot, and it always just makes me sad. I feel bad for the poor monkeys, and it also makes me feel bad for people who don't have, parents who provide this sort of comfort to them. The 1904 Marathon. The 1904 Marathon was in St. Louis, Missouri, and is one of the most chaotic races in Olympic history. The race took place on a hot and humid day with temperatures reaching 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Oof, that's brutal. The course was made up of mostly dirt roads with passing cars kicking up dust that choked the runners. They didn't even stop the cars from going around the course. Jesus. The route included challenging hills, which exhausted the athletes. A bunch of weird stuff happened. For example, Fred Lors, who was an American runner, suffered cramps earlier in the race and hitched a ride in a car for 11 miles. He then rejoined the race and crossed the finish line first, pretending he had run the whole way. But he was quickly exposed and disqualified. Did he think he wasn't going to get caught? Maybe it was 1904. Maybe it was easier to pull that off. I don't know. I feel like that's something he probably did before. Thomas Hicks. The eventual real winner, Thomas Hicks, was aided by his trainers who administer a concoction of rat poison, brandy, and raw eggs throughout the race. He barely made it to the finish line in a delirious state. Seems like a wild cocktail right there. William Garcia collapsed and was found lying unconscious with several internal injuries caused by dust inhalation. He nearly died. And Darren Carvajal was a Cuban runner who ran the race in street clothes and dress shoes, stopped to chat with spectators, snacked on apples he found in an orchard, and even took a nap before finishing in fourth place. Due to the difficulty of traveling to St. Louis at the time, only 14 of the 32 starters were from outside of the United States. This is just a wild story. You have all sorts of wild stuff going on here. I'm particularly confused by the rat poison, brandy, and raw eggs mixture. Because those are all things that are sort of bad for you, or at least people think, well, everyone thinks rat poison is bad for you. Most people think rat poison is bad for you. But, I remember people, used to say raw eggs were bad for you. And I know there's a lot of people who say brandy and alcohol is bad for you. It's almost like if they're like, all these things are really bad, so take them all and let's see what happens. Phineas Gage. Phineas Gage was an American railroad construction foreman who became famous for surviving a horrific accident in 1948 that changed his life and contributed significantly to our understanding of the brain. While working on a railroad in Vermont, Gage was using a tamping iron, a long, heavy rod, to pack explosive powder into a hole. The powder accidentally detonated, sending the tamping iron shooting upward through Gage's left cheek and passing behind his left eye and exiting through the top of his skull. Despite this gruesome injury, Gage survived. He remained conscious and was able to speak and walk with assistance shortly after the accident. Now, I think I wouldn't want to remain conscious through this, at least while they figured out what they were going to do. I think I would want to be put under for a little bit while they're like, all right, we're going to figure out what we're going to do here. But now, although Gage physically recovered, the damage to his brain, and particularly his frontal lobe, resulted in personality changes. He was once a responsible and well-mannered man. He became impulsive, irritable, and prone to profanity. His friends and family said he was no longer Gage. Gage's case provided early evidence of the connection between the frontal lobe and personality, behavior, and social cognition. And it demonstrated that damage to specific brain regions could result in distinct changes in personality and executive functions. Gage struggled to hold down jobs and maintain social relationships after the accident. He spent more time traveling and exhibiting himself as a medical curiosity. He eventually worked as a stagecoach driver in Chile before returning to the United States, where he died in 1860 from seizures that were likely related to his injury. This is one of those cases where you hear about it and you just think, oh my God. These kind of brutal, awful things are how we learn more about our bodies. So, a bad thing for him, but it contributed to helping humanity. Vladimir Demikov. Vladimir Demikov was a Soviet scientist and a pioneer in the field of organ transplantation. His work laid the foundation for many life-saving procedures that we have today. He was born into a peasant family in Russia, however, and he had an interest in biology from a young age. In 1937, as a student, he designed and built the world's first artificial heart. He served in the Red Army during World War II as a pathologist. After the war, Demikov dedicated himself to experimental surgery and transplantation, and he achieved a remarkable series of firsts. In 1946, he performed the first heart-lung transplant and the first intrathoracic heterotopic heart transplant in an animal. In 1947, he conducted the first lung transplant in a human. In 1948, he performed the first liver transplant. In 1951, he performed the first orthotopic heart transplant. In 1952, he performed the first mammary coronary anastomosis. And in 1953, he successfully completed the first experimental coronary artery bypass operation. I can tell you, I love the guy. I love that we were able to figure this out. And obviously, his work has saved countless lives. I would not want to be the first person who gets any type of surgery. Now, I understand there are certain circumstances where, no one knows what's going on, and you're got to be the first. You got to be part of an experimental surgery. But man, being the first person to get a heart transplant just seems like I don't want to be the 100th person to get a procedure. I don't want to be the 1,000th person to get a procedure. So, and also these type of surgeons, like there's a thin line here between madman and genius, right? And this guy has some other stuff that I'm not talking about because it involves animals and I don't like that stuff. But this guy was definitely on that line of genius and madman. What existed before the Big Bang? Well, what existed before the Big Bang? I mean, that's a great question, right? It's like one of those things that kind of hurts your brain to think about. What existed before the Earth existed? What happens when the Earth no longer exists? You just sort of stare at the sky and, there are theories about what there was. First is the nothingness concept. Some theories propose that there was literally nothing before the Big Bang. And this isn't just, empty space. This is just space and time did not exist. The singularity. The Big Bang theory suggests that the universe began from an incredibly hot, dense state called a singularity. Well, again, this is another thing we really can't comprehend, right? It was like the pre-existing existence. The butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is rooted in chaos theory, and it's that a small, seemingly insignificant event can have huge, unpredictable consequences over time. It was also a pretty good movie with Ashton Kutcher, although I don't think we like him anymore, especially with the Diddy stuff. The idea is this. A butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, and this tiny action creates a small change in the air. The tiny change sets off a chain reaction. The change in air pressure might affect wind patterns, which could influence the formation of a storm system. Weeks later, a hurricane hits Florida. The hurricane might not have formed at all if that butterfly hadn't flapped its wings. Now, obviously, a butterfly flapping its wings probably won't cause a hurricane, but the idea is that in complex systems, like weather patterns, tiny changes in the initial conditions can lead to dramatically different outcomes over time. The butterfly effect relies on the idea of sensitive dependence on initial conditions, and even the smallest difference at the start of a process can lead to vastly different results. Because of this sensitivity, it's incredibly difficult to predict the long-term behavior of complex systems. Things are interconnected. Everything is connected, and even seemingly isolated incidents can have ripple effects throughout the system. Weather is the typical example. Small changes in atmospheric conditions can lead to major weather events. Other ideas are history, right? You've seen the meme with the little rock knocking over all the different things, right? For example, one that gets used a lot, what would happen if Archduke Franz Ferdinand hadn't been assassinated in 1914? World War I? Would World War I still have happened? Would we have had the great band, Franz Ferdinand? This also has like a more personal effect on people, right? Their personal life. A small encounter, a small decision can change the trajectory of someone's life. Ball lightning. Ball lightning is a rare atmospheric phenomenon that scientists have no explanation for. It typically appears as a luminous spherical object that varies in size from the size of a pea to several meters in diameter. They're often described as glowing orbs, and they can range in color from red, orange, and yellow to white and blue. Some reports even describe them as transparent or translucent. Ball lightning can move erratically, it can hover, it can float, it can dart around. It has been reported to even move against the wind and pass through solid objects. Unlike the fleeting flash of a lightning bolt, ball lightning can persist for several seconds, sometimes even minutes. It can vanish abruptly, sometimes with a pop or an explosion, or can simply fade away. Now, ball lightning is usually associated with thunderstorms, but it has been reported in fair weather conditions as well. Despite numerous eyewitness accounts and ongoing research, the exact cause of ball lightning remains a mystery. There are several theories that attempt to explain its formation. The first is vaporized silicone. One hypothesis suggests that when lightning strikes the ground, it vaporizes silicone in the soil. The vaporized silicone then reacts with oxygen in the air to form a glowing ball of plasma. Atmospheric maser. Another theory proposes that ball lightning is a type of atmospheric maser, which is microwave amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. This theory suggests that intense microwave radiation generated during a thunderstorm could become trapped in a plasma bubble, creating the glowing sphere. Another theory? Black holes. Some people believe that ball lightning could be related to mini black holes or other types of phenomena. It's tough to study ball lightning because it is exceedingly rare. It's an exceedingly rare and unpredictable event. Therefore, it's nearly impossible to study in a controlled environment. It also has an extremely short duration. In recent years, scientists have made some progress in understanding ball lightning. Some researchers have been able to create ball lightning-like phenomena in the laboratory using high-voltage discharges. High-voltage discharges are one of many types of discharges that you don't want to personally have, but there have also been attempts to capture ball lightning on video and analyze its spectrum. Now that people have cell phone cameras, it's easier to catch these things as they're ongoing. But ball lightning is still a mystery, and scientists continue to try to figure it out. Jack Froese. Jack Froese died of a heart attack at the age of 32 in Dunmore, Pennsylvania on June 10th, 2011. After his death, several of Jack's friends and family members reported receiving emails from his account. The emails contained personal messages and information only Jack would have known, and they even referenced events that occurred after his death. For example, his best friend, Tim Hart, received an email from Jack's email, with the subject line, "I'm watching." And it included details about a conversation they had planned to have but never did. An email to his cousin, Deneen, mentioned a photo she had posted on Facebook of her daughter wearing a pink dress at a wedding. That wedding occurred after his death. These emails have caused confusion and chills, with some people believing they're genuine messages from beyond the grave. Other people believe that it could either be hacking, that someone could have gained access to Jack's emails accounts and have sent these messages as a prank, or that Jack might have scheduled these emails to be sent after his death, although this doesn't really explain the references to events that occurred after his death. I think that this was almost certainly either a hacker or a prankster, might have been someone related to Jack. You know, people do weird stuff when people die. So I don't really buy the idea that this is some sort of like ghost or afterlife thing. I think it was most likely someone just messing around. Chang and Ang bunker. Chang and Ang were conjoined twin brothers whose fame gave rise to the term Siamese twins. They were connected at the sternum by a band of cartilage, and while they shared some blood circulation, their organs were distinct. They were born in Siam, which is now Thailand, to a Chinese father and a Siamese Chinese mother. They were discovered by a British merchant named Robert Hunter, who saw their potential for exhibition and brought them to the Western world in 1829. They were exhibited as a curiosity. They toured extensively through the United States and Europe, captivating audiences with their unique condition and physical abilities. They were a medical marvel, and they were examined by numerous doctors and scientists, and they provide valuable insights into human anatomy and conjoined twinning. They eventually settled in North Carolina. In 1839, they retired from exhibiting and became naturalized U.S. citizens. In 1943, they married sisters, Adelaide and Sarah Yates. They became the fathers of 21 children between them. Chang had 11, Ang had 10. And they became slave owners on a plantation. As they aged, their relationship reportedly became strained due to differing personalities and desires. In 1870, Chang suffered a stroke that paralyzed his right side, and Ang had to care for them. They died within hours of each other. Ang died of a presumed heart attack a few hours after Chang passed away in his sleep. This is a pretty complicated story. There's a lot going on here, right? First of all, the idea of this British businessman taking these people and exhibiting them as, a circus curiosity is pretty deplorable. But they were able to make a living off of that and become famous. And they were able to contribute to the medical community significantly. It helped the understanding of conjoined twinning and helped develop surgical separation possibilities. They also became plantation and slave owners, which is a whole other aspect that I didn't know about. I don't think a lot of people know about these guys. So that's also a terrible thing. Also completely crazy that they had 21 kids. Absolutely wild. Charles Sherwood Stratton. Charles Sherwood Stratton was better known by his stage name General Tom Thumb. He was a famous American with dwarfism who achieved fame as a performer under circus owner P.T. Barnum. He was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, to the parents of average height. He stopped growing at 6 months old and remained about 25 inches tall. He was discovered by P.T. Barnum at age 4. Barnum taught him to sing, dance, mime, and impersonate famous people. He debuted at Barnum's American Museum in New York City at age 5, toured extensively through the U.S. and Europe, and performed for royalty and massive audiences. He became a global sensation and one of the highest paid performers of his time. In 1863, he married Lavinia Warren, who was another little person performer in Barnum's troupe, and their wedding was a media spectacle and boosted their fame. They continued to tour and perform and built a mansion in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He managed to invest his earnings wisely and lived a lavish lifestyle. Again, this is sort of a conflicted case here, right? Because while this person personally benefited, Stratton personally benefited from his performances, it was quite exploitive. I have no place to judge him for making these decisions, but I think a lot of people now find this type of stuff distasteful. Fanny Mills. Fanny Mills, also known as the Ohio Bigfoot Girl, was an American woman with an unusual medical condition that made her feet grow to an enormous size. She gained fame in the late 1800s as an attraction in dime museums and sideshows. She was born August 30th in 1860 in Sussex, England. Her family emigrated to Sandusky, Ohio, when she was a child. She had a condition called Milroy's disease, a rare genetic disorder that causes lymphedema, which leads to swelling in the limbs. In Fanny's case, it affected her lower legs and feet. Her feet reached a size of a US 30, with her legs also significantly enlarged. She began exhibiting herself in 1885 at the Bowery Museum in New York. She passed May 3rd, 1899, in Sandusky, Ohio. Frank Lentini. Frank Lentini was an Italian-American sideshow performer who was famous for having 3 legs. He was born with a parasitic twin, resulting in an extra leg extending out of the right side of his body. He was born in Sicily, Italy, and Lentini's condition was the result of a partially absorbed conjoined twin. He had 3 legs, 4 feet, and 2 sets of functioning male genitalia. Ooh. Initially, his parents refused to raise him, and he was sent to live with his aunt. He later came to accept his condition and embraced the opportunities it presented. That's horrible. I feel so terrible for this guy. He was just born, no idea. His parents refused to raise him. Horrible. He came to the United States at the age of 8 and entered the sideshow business as the Great Lentini. He toured with numerous circuses, including Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, and Buffalo Bill's Wild West Show. He was known for his agility and showmanship. He used his 3rd leg to kick a football across the stage, earning him the nickname the 3-legged football player. He was highly respected among his peers and often called the king. He got married, he had 4 children, and he became a U.S. citizen at the age of 30. And despite his physical differences, he lived a full and active life. Fee, fi, fo, fum, and fooey. Fee, fi, fo, fum, and fooey were 5 mice who traveled to the moon on the Apollo 17 mission in 1972. And they hold the world record for the most orbits of the moon by a mouse, or by mice. They were there because scientists were studying the effects of cosmic radiation on living creatures, and the mice were implanted with radiation monitors under their scalps. One of the mice died during the mission, and the remaining 4 were euthanized and dissected after their return to Earth to study the effects of space travel on their bodies. The Apollo 17 crew gave the mice their nickname. I don't know, it's kind of a bummer that they were euthanized when they got back, but I sort of understand that that's probably what would happen, right? Oscar the cat. Oscar is a famous therapy cat known for his uncanny ability to predict when residents of a nursing home were about to die. Kind of sounds to me that Oscar might have been involved, right? He lived at the Steer House Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Providence, Rhode Island. He would curl up next to patients in their final hours, seemingly sensing their impending death. He reportedly predicted over 100 deaths with surprising accuracy. Oscar was featured in the New England Journal of Medicine and even has a book written about him by Dr. David Dosa, a geriatrician at the nursing homes. Nobody knows why he was able to do this, but there have been some theories. The first is that he may have been able to detect the smell of biochemicals that are released by dying cells. He also may have been able to observe subtle changes in patients' behavior or appearance that signaled their decline. Others believe that he could sense changes in the energy or atmosphere around those nearing deaths. One of the things that is said about Oscar, and I agree, is it's a touching story because he provided comfort to many patients and their families in their final moments. And it's true, animals have a unique ability to comfort people. So I like this story. Timothy Treadwell Audio. Timothy Treadwell was the Grizzly Man, and the audio refers to the chilling audio recording captured during his fatal grizzly bear attack in 2003. The audio has never been released to the public, but it has for some reason become a source of fascination. There was a movie about this, and they don't play the actual audio of it, but they play some reaction to the director listening to the audio of it. I don't understand why this comes up in lost media circles so much. I have no desire to listen to this. It sounds horrible. There's a couple other ones in this thing too that are similar. There's the Steve Irwin stingray attack footage and the death of Brandon Lee. Again, both of these are video footage that are called lost media, but I don't really agree with these as lost media. Lost media to me is something that was available and disappeared. Something that was recorded privately or was recorded and never released isn't really lost media to me. I don't know why anyone would want to listen to the grizzly man being eaten by this bear, why anyone would want to watch Brandon Lee's final moments, or why anyone would want to watch Steve Irwin's final moments. But these things come up in these lost media videos, these lost media discussions a lot. And I have no interest to hear them. I have no interest to see them. I don't care. Okiku the doll. Okiku is a allegedly haunted doll from Japan. In 1918, a teenage boy named Ikichi Suzuki bought the doll in Sapporo for his little sister, Okiku. The girl loved the doll, played with it constantly, and even named it after herself. Sadly, Okiku died shortly after, possibly from influenza. The family kept the doll, placing it on their home altar in her memory. The family noticed something odd about the doll's hair. Originally it was cropped short, but it started to grow. They would trim it, but it kept growing back. The family believed that Okiku's spirit was residing within the doll. In 1938, the family moved and entrusted the doll to the Meninji Temple in Iwamizawa, Hokkaido. Okiku remains there to this day, displayed in a wooden box. The monks at the temple confirm that they regularly trim the doll's hair, which continues to grow. Some people believe that there is a natural explanation for the hair growth, that it is perhaps due to the type of hair used in the doll or changes in humidity. Others believe that Okiku's spirit truly inhabits the doll, with the growing hair as evidence of her presence. I don't believe that the hair is her presence in the doll. So I'm sure it is something that is more, I'm sure there's a natural explanation for it, possibly exaggerated, but I just really don't think of a haunting hair growth as really, realistic. But that's just my opinion. You can think what you want. Chris Farley's Shrek audio. Most people don't realize this, but Chris Farley was supposed to be the voice of Shrek. He was originally cast as the voice of Shrek, and he had recorded a significant portion of the dialogue before his death in 1997. From the surviving audio that has been available, it's clear that Farley's Shrek was going to be in a different direction. He was going to be a more sentimental and melancholy character than the wisecracking ogre that we saw in the final product. He was less cynical and more of a vulnerable outcast. For years, the audio was considered lost. However, snippets and clips have surfaced over time, giving fans a taste of what it might have been. It's sort of interesting to think about how different this movie would have been with Chris Farley as the voice instead of Mike Myers. And that concludes part 1 of tier 4 of the Iceberg series, the Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things Iceberg series. Go ahead and follow me on Blue Sky and TikTok. My username is AKBrews. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I am also AKBrews there. If there are spooky stories you would like me to research and do a video on, send me an email at thespookylawyer@gmail.com. I appreciate you watching my videos. I appreciate your support. We have a lot of cool things that we're going to be doing this month, a lot of cool ideas that we're going to be working on. So I appreciate your viewership. Please make sure you're subscribed. And as always, stay spooky. Hey, spooky people, it's your best friend Kenny, and this is part 2 of tier 4 of my Iceberg series on Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things by Juan the Pickle. Juan, you're still the man. We We keep going deeper and deeper into the iceberg and learning about more and more strange and disturbing unsolved mysteries and weird anomalies. Let's get spooky. Mickey Mouse in Vietnam. Mickey Mouse in Vietnam is an unofficial, short, animated, anti-war film created in 1968 by Whitney Lee Savage, who turns out to have been the father of Adam Savage from Mythbusters, and Milton Glaser. Disney had nothing to do with this production. Should be noted that this clip is not suitable for children. This stark and violent portrayal of the beloved Disney character was shocking and disturbing, especially for the time. The film was created during the height of the Vietnam War and aimed to be a powerful statement against the war's brutality. Using Mickey Mouse, a cartoon that is supposed to symbolize innocence and childhood, amplified the tragedy of war. It was produced independently and circulated outside of mainstream channels, and it was often shown at anti-war protests. Mickey Mouse in Vietnam is a cult classic and a significant piece of anti-war cinema. This is interesting because obviously this is pre-internet, and this is before we had a lot of this content sort of readily available to us. Nowadays you could look up any of these popular cartoon characters and you can see them do all sorts of things and have all sorts of messages. But back in the 60s, it was not only a lot harder to produce this type of content, but it was much harder to distribute this type of content because no one had the internet. So in order to see these things, you would have to find it, on video somewhere or watch it, like I said, as some sort of protest or something like that. It shows you how throughout time people have used art and have used characters from our culture to subvert certain types of messages or subvert political messages. And this is sort of a fantastic piece of cinema because it was able to, despite being distributed unofficially, despite being passed around by word of mouth and hand to hand, it became a popular piece of work. White holes. Now you've heard of black holes, but have you heard of white holes? Well, white holes are the theoretical opposite of black holes. Imagine a black hole, but instead of sucking everything in, it's spewing matter and energy out. That's the idea. Nothing can enter a white hole, just like nothing can escape a black hole. The theory of white holes come from the same equations as general relativity that predict black holes. However, unlike black holes, which have been observed, white holes have never been observed. It's essentially like watching a video in reverse. White holes are thought to emit matter and light. and to be constantly emitting streams of matter and light. Some theories suggest that white holes could be connected to black holes through hypothetical tunnels in space-time called wormholes. However, this is a theory about a theory. So it's very, that take is very speculative. There has never been any evidence of white holes. There are a lot of theories about how white holes would form. Some theories suggest that it could be the result of a black hole's collapse, or that the Big Bang was a white hole. The Big Bang has similarities to this theory. It was an event that spewed out vast amount of matter and energy. Again, these are astrophysical concepts that I'm not very qualified to discuss, but you should look into if you find this stuff interesting, which I do. The Lake Anjikuni disappearance. The Lake Anjikuni disappearance is a mystery from the 1930s in Lake Anjikuni, which is a remote area in what is now called Nunavut, Canada, and part of an Inuit village. A fur trapper named Joe LaBelle arrived at the village seeking shelter and found the village completely deserted. It wasn't just a few people that were gone. The entire village of about 30 people had vanished without a trace. LaBelle had found unfinished meals, personal belongings left behind, and even a fire still burning. There was a grave that appeared to have been disturbed, as if it had been dug up. There were no signs of struggle or foul play. There were no footprints or tracks leading away from the village, and no one ever reported seeing the villagers leave. Obviously, since this is a strange disappearance, there are a wide range of theories that happened here. Some believe that a sudden avalanche or natural disaster could have wiped out the village. However, there's no physical evidence that supports this. Others believe that a rapid and deadly disease might have forced the villagers to flee or caused them to die quickly and be buried elsewhere. But there were no sites of, no evidence that supports this, including, bodies or anything like that. Of course, some people believe there was an alien abduction, a curse, or some other paranormal phenomenon. And another idea that's been floated out is perhaps this was just a situation of mass panic that caused the villagers to abandon their homes in sudden panic. Despite this being a fascinating mystery for more than a century now, investigations and attempt to explain the Lake Anjikuni disappearance have been unsuccessful. The fact that the location was so remote and the passage of time has made it difficult to gather any sort of reliable evidence. A lot of this is second, third, fourth hand observations. And there have been conflicting accounts about what happened. Kind of like how, a game of telephone here. Mass disappearances like this are always fascinating to me. I think probably the most likely scenario is there was some sort of situation where the villagers were made to leave or captured, or there was some sort of foul play here. Because in the event of a natural disaster, there would be a lot more evidence, right? There would be more, there'd be bodies of things that happened. So either, the entire town just up and left, or something made the entire town go with them. It's still fascinating, though. Virginia Carpenter. Virginia Carpenter is a unsolved disappearance case. Mary Virginia Carpenter, who is often called Jimmy, was 20 years old at the time of her disappearance. She was from Texarkana, Texas. The people who knew her said she was a bright young woman who had plans to attend summer classes at the Texas State College for Women, which is now known as Texas Women's University, in Denton, Texas, to pursue a career as a nurse or lab technician. Virginia disappeared on June 1st, 1948. She boarded a train called the Texas Special Train from Texarkana to Denton. She was last seen taking a taxi from the Denton train station to the college campus around 9:30 p.m. She never arrived at her dormitory, and no one ever saw her again. Despite investigations, no trace of Virginia has ever been found. Her luggage was discovered on the lawn of her dormitory, but there were no signs of foul play or any indication of where she may have gone. And so, like with all these unsolved disappearances cases, there are, a few typical theories, right? The first being foul play, that she was the victim of a crime, possibly by the taxi driver or someone else that she encountered. Others believe that she may have suffered from amnesia and wandered off, unable to remember who she was. And some people believe she ran away, intentionally disappeared to start a new life. Law enforcement has investigated the case, conducted interviews, followed up on leads, sought evidence, but nothing concrete has ever been established. The case gets renewed from time to time of people trying to use new technologies and investigative techniques to help solve this disappearance. Now, I believe that the most likely scenario here is that she was a victim of foul play. It seems like the taxi driver is probably a good place to start, as either that person was the last person to see Virginia. Well, that person is the last known person to see Virginia, but it's likely that the taxi driver was either involved or may have seen something after Virginia was dropped off. The luggage in the yard sort of suggests to me that at least the taxi driver got her to her destination of the campus. Something could have happened right after she was dropped off. Asha Degree. Asha Degree is an unsolved disappearance from Shelby, North Carolina. She disappeared in the year 2000. She was born August 5th, 1990. She was described as a shy, responsible young girl who loved reading and basketball. On February 14th, 2000, in the early morning hours of Valentine's Day, Asha left her family home. No one knows why. She packed a book bag with some of her belongings and walked out into the stormy night despite the rain and wind. Several motorists saw her walking around Highway 18. One driver turned around to offer help, but Asha ran into a wooded area and disappeared. She was last seen around 4 a.m. near a local business. There have been extensive investigations into her disappearance, but there's been no trace found of her. Her book bag was found 18 months later, wrapped in plastic, buried near a construction site about 26 miles from where she was last seen. A witness reported seeing a girl matching Asha's description getting into a dark green car around the time of her disappearance. In September 2024, investigators announced that they now believe that Asha was a victim of a homicide. Search warrants have been executed at multiple properties in Cleveland County, and a car similar to the one described in the potential sighting, the green car, was recovered. This is a significant break in this case. However, details are still limited because it's an active investigation. This is almost assuredly a foul play situation. And really the question sort of becomes, well, where was she going? And that probably leads you to what happened to her. Or she could have been going somewhere and gotten taken or was a victim of foul play on the way there. But it sort of sounds like to me that maybe she was going to meet somebody. But as a 9-year-old, that's pretty crazy. This is just a heartbreaking story. And there's so many weird parts about this case. I don't know how a 9-year-old leaves a house like that and gets that far without somebody noticing. Well, I mean, people noticed, but Seemed like something that if someone had intervened, they would have saved her life. Timothy Pitson. This is a somewhat recent case that's sort of local to me. Timothy Pitson was a young boy from Aurora, Illinois, who disappeared in 2011. This case got national attention due to how strange it was. Timothy James Pitson was born on October 18th, 2004. He disappeared May 11th, 2011, so he was 6 years old. Timothy's mother, Amy Fry Pitson, unexpectedly checked him out of his kindergarten class on May 11th, 2011. She took him on a 3-day trip to various amusement parks and zoos in Illinois and Wisconsin. Timothy's mother was found dead by self-unaliving in a motel room in Rockford, Illinois on May 14th. She left a note behind that said that Timothy was safe with people who love and care for him and that he would never be found. That note is what makes this case so bizarre. He was safe, and he would never be found. And true to her word, she's never been found. Timothy has never been located. His mother was very clearly in some sort of manic episode when she took Timothy. You know, the idea that he was safe and would never be found, at least in this context, isn't very comforting. Maybe she gave him to someone who gave him a new identity and disappeared, or helped him disappear or fade into the background. Or maybe that means something more sinister. I hope it's the former. I hope he's still alive and safe. Over the years, there have been a lot of reported sightings of Timothy, but none have ever been confirmed. In 2019, a young man claiming to be Timothy was found in Kentucky, but a DNA test proved that he was lying. Timothy's father, James Pitson, continues to hold out hope that he is still alive and would eventually be found. The Poe Toaster. The Poe Toaster is a person who pays annual tribute, or who paid annual tribute to the famous author Edgar Allan Poe at his grave in Baltimore. Every year on Poe's birthday, January 19, in the early hours of the morning, the Poe Toaster would appear at Westminster Hall and Burying Ground in Baltimore. He was always dressed in black with a wide-brimmed hat and a white scarf obscuring his face. The toaster would approach Poe's grave, pour a glass of cognac, and raise a toast. He would then leave 3 red roses and the unfinished bottle of cognac at the gravesite. After the toaster would go away.
A decades-long Baltimore tradition on display tonight. A nameless man paying tribute to Edgar Allan Poe at Poe's gravesite. WMER2 News' one of the newest reporters, Jack Watson, got a chance to experience it. He joins us now to give us his experience.
Well, Kelly, tomorrow is Edgar Allan Poe's 214th birthday, and tonight at the church where he's buried, an eccentric tribute to Baltimore's most famous poet. Suddenly, there came a tapping. A ghostly figure out of the shadows, like something Edgar Allan Poe himself would write. Flowers, words in Latin, and a toast. A tribute to the celebrated American writer who called Baltimore home. Tracy Mathias also calls Baltimore home. She grew up a few blocks from here and has been seeing this display in some form for years.
We used to hide out here at 3 o'clock in the morning and wait for the toaster to arrive. This was nice.
People have wondered since the 1930s who this guy is, or who, if there are multiple people involved, who these people are. It's likely that there are multiple toasters, that this is some sort of tradition that has been passed on through generations, as this tradition has continued for over 70 years. So it's unlikely that it's the same person. I'm surprised there haven't been, well, I'm sure there have been copycats. Some people believe that this is just a fan of Edgar Allan Poe paying homage to their favorite author. Others believe that this might have been a relative of Poe's. or someone who is connected to the family. There are theories that there's some sort of secret society or literary group who's involved in this, dedicated to keeping Poe's memory alive. But this is a pretty great story, one of those great weird mysteries that people don't really wrap their heads around or really know a lot about if you're outside of the Baltimore area or aren't deep into the lore of Edgar Allan Poe. I like the idea that this is just some sort of tradition by some, family. This is some group out there or some family out there that has passed from generation to generation, being like, hey, it's very important, son or daughter, that you go to Edgar Allan Poe's grave and do this thing and disappear and be very sneaky and weird about it. There's also the possibility that it's just, someone heard about someone doing this and thought it would be neat to do this, and it sort of became a tradition in that way too. I've always liked Edgar Allan Poe. He was one of the first writers that I really got into. And, that obviously makes sense as being the spooky lawyer and being into spooky stuff. Edgar Allan Poe's work is very spooky. Annabelle Lee is a straight banger, though. The Teos Hum. The Teos Hum is a mysterious low-frequency humming noise that has been reported by a small percentage of residents of Teos, New Mexico, although there have been other reportings around the world. No one knows what this noise is. The hum is described as a low-pitched droning or rumbling sound, which is often compared to a distant diesel engine or perhaps a refrigerator humming. Although there are varied descriptions. Some call it a hum, some describe it as a vibration, a pulsing, or even a whine. Only a small percentage of people in the affected area can hear the hum, about 2% of the population by estimates. And the hum is often more noticeable indoors and at night when the ambient noise is reduced. Now, the people who do hear it, the hum can be distracting, annoying, can cause sleep disturbances, headaches, and some have even reported nosebleeds. Although the source of the hum is unknown, there are theories, right? Some believe it's nearby industrial equipment or power lines that are causing the hum. But if that were the cause, you would think that would be a lot easier to identify. Some believe that the hum could be related to geological activity, such as tectonic plate movement or underground water flow. There is also a concept called otoacoustic emissions, which is where the human ear generates its own sounds. And there's a belief that this might be why some people hear the hum. And there are people who believe that this is just people with tinnitus. I believe that this is probably some sort of a noise pollution issue, whether it's, an industrial thing. I think it's most likely a man-made noise issue. Although the idea that there's something in this area that's causing the ear to produce this sound is sort of fascinating to me. But, the other thing is there are frequencies that people can't hear, right? And some people can hear a certain frequency and some people can't hear for certain frequencies. So, this could just be a certain frequency that could be either industrial or natural that these certain people can hear for whatever reason when it's let out. Either way, it sounds like that would be very annoying. I would hate to have that kind of noise in my head all the time, and I would probably move. Heartbeat in the brain. With every beat of your heart, blood surges through the arteries in your brain. This creates pressure waves and subtle expansions and contractions of brain tissue. These rhythmic pulsations are synchronized with your heartbeat. So while the blood flow, though, is a major factor, it's not everything. There's cerebrospinal fluid that surrounds and cushions the brain and also plays a role in these pulsations. And these pulsations are essential for oxygen and nutrients getting to the brain and removing waste products, which makes sense because it's related to blood flow, right? However, Recent research suggests that these pulsations might actually influence the activity of individual neurons in the brain, potentially affecting how we process information and form memories. Doctors are studying these pulsations to see if they can provide insights into brain disorders like Alzheimer's. It's believed that changes in brain pulsations may be an early indicator of Alzheimer's. Monitoring pulsations can help assess the severity of brain injuries and track recovery. Pulsations can be affected by stroke, and studying them has helped in the diagnosis and treatment. These pulsations are observed via advanced MRI techniques in order to visualize and measure these brain pulsations in detail. Researchers have also used electrodes to implant in the brain to directly measure the electrical activity of neurons in relation to the heartbeat. This is fascinating science stuff. The brain is this crazy thing that, we all have and people still don't really understand that well. So the idea that they're able to look at these things that occur in the brain and study them is helpful for developing new treatments. There's also a belief that these brain heartbeats or brain pulsations can be used to develop more advanced technology that can help study the brain. Now, this is just sort of a neat story to me. I don't know it's a mystery in that it's a medical mystery and no one really knows a lot about it yet, but science is fascinating, especially health science. Yay, video games. Yay, video games is a Redditor. And this Redditor went on a massive manic posting spree in 2010. His first post started in the subreddit r/gaming about the video game Elder Scrolls, and he began posting confusing and nonsensical comments. The comments were sometimes accompanied by odd images. The behavior led to Yay Video Games being shadow banned on Reddit, meaning that their posts were no longer visible to others. The Yay Video Games Redditor is often cited as someone who is in the middle of experiencing a mental breakdown, and that this erratic behavior is part of some sort of health crisis or episode. Others believe it was dedicated and long trolling, trying to confuse and disrupt the Reddit community. And there are others believe that it was some sort of just bot that just sort of went haywire and just kept posting. Yay Video Games has become an internet legend. There is a subreddit dedicated to Yay Video Games, that it would be r/Yay Video Games. Personally, I believe that this is either a bot that just sort of went haywire, or someone who's just trolling, or someone looking for attention. The black hole information paradox. The black hole information paradox is a problem in theoretical physics. Now remember, I'm not a physicist, so I'm not qualified to discuss this, but I'm going to do the best I can. It involves the conflict between two theories, the theory of general relativity and the theory of quantum mechanics. Black holes are inescapable. According to Einstein's general relativity theory, anything that crosses a black hole's event horizon is trapped forever, including light. This means information about what fell in is gone. This means the energy that went in is gone. Quantum mechanics says that energy cannot be created or destroyed. These two ideas seem incompatible. If the information is destroyed or lost in a black hole, it violates quantum mechanics. But if the information is preserved, how does it escape the black hole's inescapable gravity? Stephen Hawking showed that black holes actually emit radiation due to quantum effects near the event horizon. This radiation causes black holes to slowly lose mass and eventually evaporate. If a black hole evaporates completely, what happened to everything that it swallowed? Does it just go away, which would violate quantum mechanics? Does it somehow emerge with the Hawking radiation? So physicists have been grappling with this paradox for decades. Some believe that the energy or information is encoded in the Hawking radiation, that the information is in the radiation that is emitted. There are also observed remnants of black holes that haven't evaporated completely and leave behind tiny remnants that preserve the energy or information. It's believed that there needs to be more research in this area and perhaps even a new theory of quantum gravity to understand what exactly happens in these black holes. Now, I don't understand these concepts very well. I have a very casual understanding of quantum mechanics and black hole theory, but I find it really interesting. And I'm just going to trust the scientists to explain to me what's going on rather than attempt to explain it myself. The Doomsday Stonehenge. The Doomsday Stonehenge refers to the Georgia Guidestones, a mysterious granite monument that was in Elbert County, Georgia from 1980 until it was partially destroyed in 2022. The structure is made of 6 granite slabs that are over 19 feet tall and weigh over 100 tons. 10 guides for humanity were inscribed in 8 modern languages and 4 ancient scripts. Like Stonehenge, the Guidestones had astronomical alignments with a slot that aligned with the sun's position throughout the year. The inscriptions advocated for things like maintaining population control, maintaining the population of the earth under 500 million, environmental protection, world government, guiding reproduction wisely. Now, this was called America's Stonehenge due to the strange nature of these stones. And, of course, they've attracted a lot of conspiracy theories. Some claim that they were built by Satanists or a secret society promoting the New World Order. Always the New World Order, right? The Guidestones have been vandalized multiple times. In July 2022, an explosion destroyed a portion of the monument, and authorities subsequently destroyed the remaining structure for safety reasons. The monument was built, or at least commissioned, by a person or group with the pseudonym R.C. Christian, who claimed to represent a small group of loyal Americans. No one knows who or what R.C. Christian was. The mystery of Doomsday Stonehenge is intriguing to a lot of people because of the apocalyptic tone in the inscriptions and the mystery about who was involved. Now, I think this one is sort of easy to say, like, yeah, whoever built it to spread this message. But the fact that no one knows who built it or really what the message is sort of is fascinating. And, the question comes, well, did this person build this in earnest? Or is this just some sort of elaborate trolling? I fall onto the side of whoever built this probably meant it. They probably built it on purpose. And they meant whatever things were in this. But, it's a shame it was destroyed. I Am God 4chan. Now, whenever 4chan is involved, you're about to hear some weird stuff, right? The I Am God copy pasta is an example of 4chan culture. Again, a copy pasta is a strange or sometimes spooky story that gets copied and pasted in these internet forums. The copy pasta usually appears as a short, blunt declaration of godlike power and the insignificance of humanity. It's often something like, I am God, I created the universe, you are all insignificant ants to me, I can do whatever I want, and there is nothing you can do to stop me. There are a lot of variations of this post. Some of these posts may contain threats of violence or harm, although these are believed to be for shock value. And sometimes the copy pasta is used ironically or humorously. It's important to remember that this originated on 4chan, so it's almost certainly trolling. But for whatever reason, this particular post, this particular piece of copy pasta has spread all over the place and has been a very popular one. And it's become a recognizable piece of internet lore. I think it's pretty clear that this is some type of trolling, because that's generally what 4chan is for. But it is sort of fascinating that this became sort of a mainstream meme. Agartha. Agartha is a kingdom from folklore that is said to be within the Earth's core. And this is a concept that is popular in esotericism, occultism, and New Age beliefs. It's kind of a hidden world of advanced beings with a connection to the surface world. It's believed to be located within the Earth. Now, obviously, since this is legend, the stories and details change from where you hear the story. There's a question about whether there is just sort of an advanced network of tunnels in the Earth that create this area, or if just there is a large inner hollow surface. According to the lore, a few entry points are the Himalayas, the Gobi Desert, the North and South Poles, and the Kentucky Mammoth Cave. Its inhabitants are described as highly evolved beings, spiritually and technologically advanced, and living in peace and harmony. Some of the legends state that the Agarthans have influenced surface civilizations throughout history, and that they may even be monitoring our progress. The legends say that Agarthans have advanced technology such as flying vehicles and a source of energy called Vril. Not Riz, Vril. We should make Vril the new Riz. The concept of Agartha was first introduced by French occultist Alexandre Saint-Yves d'Alavendre in his 1886 book, Mission de Liende. Agatha is linked to the belief in hollow earth and has been popularized by figures such as John Sims and Cyrus Teed. Did you know that there is a hollow earth theory? It's kind of like flat earth, kind of the same idea. Now, the concept of Agartha has come up in a lot of various types of media and art, including the popular Journey to the Center of the Earth. There's no scientific evidence to support the existence of Agartha or hollow earth. Some believe that hollow earth is supposed to be a symbolic concept, that Agartha is a representation of the inner world, the subconscious, or higher states of consciousness. I think this is mostly a literary thing, and it's useful, in that context. I don't believe that the earth is actually hollow. I hope you don't. But if you do, leave a comment. Tell me about your theory, right? Not trying to start a war with the hollow earthers. Rebecca Berger. This was a tough one. Rebecca Blogger was a fitness blogger who died after an exploding whipped cream dispenser hit her in the chest, which caused a heart attack. She was 33 years old at the time. She was a fitness blogger. She would write about fitness and traveling on social media. She had 55,000 Facebook friends and 154,000 Instagram followers. According to her family, the dispenser, which was a kitchen utensil, so it wasn't a can of whipped cream, I don't think. I think it was some sort of whipped cream making thing, exploded, hit her in the chest, and caused a heart attack. It's a sad story. But you see things like this where people get hit in the chest in just the right way, can cause a heart attack, can cause someone's heart to stop. There was that Buffalo Bills football player that happened to fairly recently. Joshua Maddox. Joshua Maddox was a teenager from Woodland Park, Colorado. He was last seen on May 2008. His disappearance was widely reported, and he was considered a missing individual for many years. In August 2015, his body was discovered in the chimney of a vacant cabin near his home. There were unusual circumstances related to his death. The cabin belonged to an individual named Chuck Murphy, who was demolishing the cabin when his body was found. The autopsy concluded that Joshua had no signs of trauma, drugs, or alcohol in his system, and the death was ruled as accidental. Authorities believe he may have tried to break into the cabin by shimmering down through the chimney. However, it was a freezing night. His clothes were found inside the cabin. He was found in the chimney upside down. So one of the beliefs is that perhaps he had some sort of panic. He took off his clothes. He went outside for some reason, got locked out, and then tried to go in through the attic. Now, when I was doing research for this, I found something that I have actually never seen before in any of these videos about Joshua Maddox. There is a Reddit post, and again, take it with a grain of salt because it's Reddit, but from a Redditor named Sarah_Renee14. This Reddit post was from 11 months ago, and it only has 8 points, so it hasn't been seen, or 8 upvotes. It hasn't been seen very much. The Reddit post says, Josh was one of my close friends. He was pretty reclusive, and there were only a few of us that truly knew him. We all tried to go to the cops and tell them that Andy Newman killed Josh. No one cared. Andy Newman had already been implicated in a murder in New Mexico and was bragging about putting Josh in a hole. No one took us seriously. Josh didn't do this to himself. He was eccentric at times, but he would have never just crawled into a chimney without clothes. It breaks my heart that this investigation was closed and that they demolished the property. Now look, this is a Reddit post by some anonymous user on the internet. And as far as I can tell, there hasn't been any actual proof posted by this poster to establish that this is real or not. But this is a popular unsolved disappearance case, or rather, this is a popular unsolved mystery, and any of these stories is sort of interesting. So, was foul play involved here? Is a good question. I don't know the answer to that. The foul play angle is weird. I think that there needs to be, I would need more information, and you would think that there would be forensic evidence that would be able to establish whether or not foul play was involved. But a lot of people believe that foul play was involved, so you can take that however you will. Larry Eli Murillo Moncada was a 24-year-old man from Council Bluffs, Iowa, who went missing in November 2009. He was an employee at a local supermarket. Larry went missing after leaving his parents' home during a snowstorm. He was reportedly upset about not taking his prescription medication at the time. In January 2019, almost 10 years later, his body was found behind a large refrigerator unit at the same supermarket where he worked. Workers were removing the equipment from the store, which had been closed down a few years prior when they made the discovery. It's believed that Larry climbed on top of the coolers, which was apparently a common practice for employees of this location, to take a break, and fell into a narrow gap behind them. He became trapped and couldn't escape, and his death was ruled accidental. It's always so wild to me when these cases, they find these bodies in these areas that you think, while they might be hidden, they're not exactly hard to find. You would think cadaver dogs might be able to find these people. But a sad story nonetheless. Isaiah Otieno. Isaiah Otieno was a pedestrian who was among 4 people killed when a helicopter crashed into a residential neighborhood in Canada. According to witnesses, the helicopter had 3 people on board and appeared to hover as if it was looking for a landing spot before it crashed onto a street and burst into flames in Cranbrook, British Columbia. You want to talk about bad luck? Getting hit by a crashing helicopter is not something I needed to add to my quiver of worries. My anxieties are already a rich tapestry. And so we get to add now, a helicopter might just crash on my head. Lee Sang Soap. Apologize if I mispronounced that, but Lee Sang-soop was a South Korean man who tragically died in 2005 after a prolonged gaming session. He was reportedly addicted to the game StarCraft. He spent excessive amounts of time in internet cafes, often neglecting his basic needs like sleep and food. In August 2005, Lee entered an internet cafe and played StarCraft for approximately 50 hours straight with minimal breaks. He eventually collapsed due to exhaustion and heart failure. Despite being rushed to the hospital, he was pronounced dead. His death brought attention to the dangers of gaming addiction and the importance of maintaining a healthy balance between virtual and real life. It served as a wake-up call for many gamers and sparked discussions about responsible gaming habits and the need for support systems for those struggling with addiction. Lee Sang-soop's story is a tragic reminder of the potential consequences of addiction. And addiction can come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. People think of alcohol addiction, they think of drug addiction, but there's many different kinds of addiction. Gaming addiction, gambling addiction, all sorts of different ways you can become addicted. The 2018 Horizon Air Q400 incident. The 2018 Horizon Air Q400 incident happened at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport on August 10, 2018. Richard Russell, a 29-year-old ground service agent for Horizon Air with no piloting experience, stole a Bombardier Q400 turboprop airplane from the airport. He was the only person on board.
It was August 10th, 2018. Richard Russell, also known as Bebo, clocked into work at SeaTac Airport at 2:36 p.m. You see him here briefly showing his badge to TSA. He walks through the employee security checkpoint. He's wearing a black t-shirt that says the sky's no limit. He grabs his backpack and continues. After this moment, 5 hours go by, according to the FBI report. It's unclear what he was doing for this time. Around 7:15 p.m., he arrived with a tow vehicle at the cargo area at the far north end of SeaTac, known as Cargo 1. Air traffic control started to sense something was not right when trying to make contact.
The Dash 8 on runway 16 center, say your call sign.
That's Russell on the left side of your screen in the tow vehicle. He's got complete control over the aircraft. You can see him release the plane from the vehicle, and the plane starts rolling forward. He really only has a few seconds to start running towards the door of the plane. Watch him as he opens the cabin door and jumps in. He pulls the door back up very quickly.
Seattle ground, Horizon guy, about to take off. It's going to be crazy.
Tower, you need to call and scramble now.
Russell can be seen taking off in this new video. Several angles show the Horizon airplane leaving ground.
There's an emergency situation going on, and FAA Tower is not accepting any aircraft right now, not letting anybody depart.
While up in the air, Russell continued to radio in.
Hey, I found myself in a bit of a predicament. I'm in the air right now and just kind of soaring around.
At one point, he said he was going to check out Mount Rainier. An hour and 13 minutes after taking off, Russell crashed the plane on a remote Pierce County island, ending one of the most serious domestic airline security breaches since 9/11. The FBI ruled his death a suicide. Madison Wade, King 5 News.
Air traffic controllers made contact with Russell and tried to guide him to a safe landing, but he was erratic and expressed thoughts of self-harm. The FBI and the National Transportation Safety Board conducted a thorough investigation, and they found no evidence of terrorism or any possible connection to a wider plot. No one knows why Russell did this. People described him as a quiet and well-liked person, but he had expressed some mental struggles in online posts. The police investigation revealed that he had researched flight simulation software and unaliving methods. The incident raised serious concerns about airport security protocols and the access that ground crew members have to aircraft. Once again, this is another great example of how mental health in our country is neglected, how people are looked down upon for seeking help with mental health, and how that culture needs to change. Thankfully, no one else was injured in this case, but Russell's life could have been saved too if he had sought proper mental health care. If you are struggling, seek mental health care. There's nothing wrong with it. I've done it. Lots of people have done it. The Cocoa Listhill epidemic. The Cocoa Listhill epidemic was a series of outbreaks that ravaged the indigenous populations of Mexico during the 16th century. Cocoa Listhill was characterized by high fevers, severe headaches, dizziness, dark urine, bloody diarrhea, abdominal pain, jaundice, and bleeding from the eyes, nose, and mouth. Death often occurred within a few days. The mortality rate of this disease was extremely high, with estimates suggesting that some outbreaks killed up to 80% of those infected. Primarily indigenous people of Mexico were affected, although there was some impact on European colonialists. The most devastating epidemics occurred between 1545 and 1548, 1576 and 1578. Cocoa Listhill caused a massive decline in the indigenous population of Mexico, contributing significantly to the social and cultural disruption following the Spanish conquest. Some estimates suggest that millions died. It was originally thought to be European disease like typhus or measles. Recent research suggests that Cocoa Listhill may have been caused by a native viral hemorrhagic fever, possibly related to salmonella. Drought and famine likely played a role in weakening the population and making them more susceptible to the disease. Cocoa Listhill is a crucial part of understanding the demographic and cultural changes in Mexico after European contact. The exact cause of this disease remains a medical mystery and is a subject of ongoing research. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if colonialism played an impact in this, and it sort of suggests that it did, right? You know, the famine and the droughts made people weaker, made them more susceptible to this disease, even if the disease wasn't necessarily directly from colonialism. I mean, it's no surprise that colonialism had a devastating impact on indigenous people. The Hollandwell incident. The Hollandwell incident refers to an event that occurred in 1980 at the Hollandwell Showground in Nottinghamshire, England. During a junior brass band competition, hundreds of children, around 300 of the 500 present, suddenly began experiencing fainting attacks, nausea, vomiting, and other symptoms. Others reported headaches and sore throats. The symptoms came on quickly and mysteriously. Most children recovered relatively quickly once they were removed from the showground and given fresh air. Despite investigations, the exact cause of the incident was never determined. Some people believe that this was a mass hysteria situation where the stressful environment of the competition combined with the hot weather and fatigue may have triggered a mass psychogenic illness. Psychogenic illness is when physical symptoms spread through a group due to psychological factors rather than a physical cause. Or, you know, people just sort of start feeling a certain way because they see other people feeling a certain way. Another theory suggests that pesticides used in nearby fields may have drifted out of the showground and caused the symptoms. However, no specific pesticides were identified, and the tests were inconclusive. There are other theories such as contaminated water, food poisoning, or even some unknown environmental factor. Now, this incident is, sort of a fascinating example of mass illness and quickly onsetting mass illness, which is sort of fascinating, especially since it all sort of dissipated rather quickly. Now, I know that the leading theory is sort of a mass hysteria, and that might be it. Another idea was, well, was there something environmental that caused this? I think that that's also likely. Maybe it wasn't pesticide. Maybe there was some sort of gas that was leaking or some sort of pollen or fungus in the area. I don't know for sure, but I think that is a pretty good idea. The year 2038 problem. Remember Y2K? Well, you're going to love the sequel, Y2K 38. The year 2038 is a potential timekeeping error that could occur in some computer systems on January 19th, 2038. Here's why. Unix time. Many computer systems use a system called Unix time, which stores the current time as the number of seconds that have passed since January 1st, 1970 at 000000. Older systems often use a 32-bit integer to store this number. The maximum value a 30-bit integer can hold is 2 trillion. I'm just going to say the numbers 2,147,483,647.4. On January 19th, 2038, at 3:14:07 UTC, the Unix time count will exceed this number. When the counter reaches its limit, it rolls over to a negative number. This could cause programs and systems that rely on this time data to malfunction or crash. The issue will primarily affect older systems that still use 32-bit integers for timekeeping. Many modern systems have already transitioned to 64-bit integers, which have a much larger capacity and won't be affected. But there'll be a new one, the 2090 something. But we'll be dead by then. Most of us will be dead by then. But older embedded systems in critical infrastructure like power plants and medical devices could be affected. Now, upgrading to 64-bit systems effectively solves the problem. The problem is to update the software. Sometimes hardware needs to be updated, which costs money. And as we know, in this country, we don't like fixing infrastructure. Now, experts believe that the year 2038 problem will be less disruptive than the Y2K bug. Many systems have already been updated, and people are much more aware of the issue. And we've got 14 years. So it's probably not going to cause the widespread chaos that Y2K did. Not that Y2K really did spread mass chaos. I remember really rooting for Y2K on New Year's Eve, 1999. I was really hoping that something would happen, and nothing happened. But it's sort of funny that we sort of have these built-in times that, when whoever created this decided, 2038 is so long from now, we'll never have to worry about this. And then all of a sudden it's 2038. Go ahead and make sure you're following me on Blue Sky and TikTok. My username is AKBruce. Follow me on Twitter. My username there is AKBruce. If there is a spooky and disturbing story that you would like me to cover, please send me an email. My email address is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. This has been part 2 of Tier 4 of the Iceberg series. I will get working on part 3, and we'll have that up soon also. We also have a variety of other exciting stuff going on this month, so please keep watching. I appreciate you watching my videos. Please make sure that you're subscribed to this channel. Please like and share these videos. Share these videos with all your friends. Tell them tell them check out this guy named Kenny. He does spooky videos, and see what they say. Again, I appreciate your support. And remember, stay spooky. Hey, spooky people. It's your best friend Kenny here, and we are now at the final part of Tier 4 of the Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things Iceberg by Juan the Pickle. Let's get spooky. As we finish this tier of this Unsolved Mysteries and Weird Things Iceberg, make sure that you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like and share this video. Share this video with everybody you know. Come on, let's get this done. All right. Let's get into it. The Devil's Tower. I think most people know what the Devil's Tower is. But for those who don't, the Devil's Tower is a geological formation located in northeastern Wyoming, and it's composed of igneous rock, which means it's a hill with steep sides and a flat top that was likely formed by magma that cooled and hardened underneath. It's 1,267 feet above the Belle Fourche River and stands 867 feet from its summit to its base. That means its summit is 5,112 feet above sea level. It's considered a sacred site by many indigenous tribes, including the Lakota and the Crow people. It became a national monument under Theodore Roosevelt. It's known for hundreds of parallel cracks, making it a popular and challenging destination for rock climbers. While most scientists agree that it was formed from magma, the exact process of how it was formed is still debated and is unknown. The Devil's Hole. The Devil's Hole is a geological formation in Death Valley National Park in Nevada. It's a geothermal pool within a detached unit of the park, meaning it's separated from the main part of Death Valley. What makes the Devil's Hole so special is that it's, first of all, the only natural habitat of the critically endangered Devil's Hole pupfish. This tiny fish is found nowhere else in the world and is adapted to the extreme conditions of the Devil's Hole. It's a geothermal pool. The water in the Devil's Hole maintains a constant temperature of around 93 degrees Fahrenheit and has very low oxygen levels. The pool is the surface opening of a vast underwater cave system that has been explored to the depths of over 436 feet. It's a valuable site for scientific research, providing insights into desert aquatic ecosystems, geological processes, and climate change. The site has cultural significance to indigenous people, including the Timbisha Shoshone tribe, who consider it a sacred place. Due to the fragility of the ecosystem and the presence of endangered pupfish, the Devil's Hole is closely monitored and access is restricted. The Devil's Kettle. The Devil's Kettle is a waterfall located in Judge C.R. Magny State Park in Minnesota. It's a unique geological formation where the Brule River splits into two streams as it flows over a rocky ledge. One stream flows normally over the waterfall and continues downstream to Lake Superior. However, the other stream flows into a deep hole in the rock known as the Kettle and seemingly vanishes without a trace. Despite numerous attempts to track the water's path, including using dye, ping pong balls, and even GPS trackers, they're throwing Apple AirTags in there. No one has been able to definitively determine where the water that enters the kettle resurfaces. The Devil's Kettle is formed by a mass of rhyolite, a volcanic rock that's as hard as granite. This rock is eroded over time, creating the unusual split in the river and the deep hole where the water disappears. While the mystery of the Devil's Kettle remains unsolved, recent research suggests that the water likely flows underneath and rejoins the Brule River further downstream. However, the exact path and location where the water resurfaces is still unknown. The basement tapes. Now, this could be one or two things. It could either be related to Bob Dylan or it could be related to the Columbine shooters. If it's referring to Bob Dylan, this refers to a collection of recordings made by Bob Dylan and the band in 1967 in the basement of a house known as Big Pink in western Saugerties, New York. While some of the recordings have been officially released, a significant portion of the material remains unreleased and is considered lost media by fans and collectors. If it's the Columbine basement tapes, the Columbine basement tapes are a series of video recordings made by Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, the perpetrators of the Columbine High School massacre in 1999. These tapes were recorded in the months leading up to the attack and contained disturbing content, including hate speech. Harris and Klebold expressed racist and hateful views towards specific individuals and groups. They detail their plans for the massacre, including their weapons, targets, and desired outcomes. They rant about their feelings of alienation, anger, and resentment towards their classmates and society in general. They offer apologies to their parents for the pain they're about to cause. The tapes were discovered by investigators after the massacre and were initially kept from public release due to the graphic and disturbing nature. However, transcripts of the tapes were eventually released, and experts have been shown in documentaries about the Columbine shooting. Now, I understand that this is lost media, and lost media circles are generally searching for any and every type of lost media, and I understand that there's a lot of people who are interested in the Columbine case. However, this stuff, there's really no interest to this for me. I really don't care what these two idiots thought or what these idiots' plans were. They were high schoolers. They didn't have any interesting thoughts. What they did was terrible. So I really don't think giving them this sort of credit is worth it. This isn't interesting. This is just the rants of some idiot high school kids that turned out to be absolutely psychopathic people. The Hill of Crosses. The Hill of Crosses is a site of pilgrimage located in northern Lithuania, about 12 kilometers north of the city of Saggaya. It's a small hill covered with hundreds of thousands of crosses of various sizes and materials placed there by pilgrims over the centuries. The exact tradition is unknown, but it's believed to have started after the 1831 uprising, when people began placing crosses on the hill as a form of resistance and remembrance. The Hill of Crosses is a symbol of faith, hope, and resistance for the Lithuanian people. It represents their religious devotion. It's a testament to the deep religious faith of the Lithuanian people, particularly their devotion to Catholicism. It's a symbol of national Lithuanian identity and resistance against oppression, particularly during the Soviet era when religious expression was suppressed. It's also a place of hope and remembrance, where people can come to pray for peace for their country and to remember their loved ones. The tradition of placing crosses is believed to have begun after the failed 1831 uprising against Russian rule. Despite attempts by Soviet authorities to destroy the Hill of Crosses, people continued to place crosses there in defiance. Pope John Paul II visited the Hill of Crosses in 1993, further solidifying its status as a significant religious site. Today, the Hill of Crosses continues to be a popular pilgrimage destination for people from all over the world. It's a place of reflection, prayer, and remembrance, and a testament to the enduring power of faith and human resilience. This is pretty cool. I've never been to Lithuania, but it's probably a very powerful thing to witness, regardless of whether you are of Lithuanian descent or not. Sailor Mouth. Sailor Mouth is a lost media SpongeBob SquarePants episode. In this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick learn sentence enhancers, also known as swear words, and use them excessively, with the actual words bleeped out by dolphin noises. The lost media aspect comes in with the idea that somewhere a version of this episode exists where the voice actors actually swore. This is plausible, as they likely did swear during recording to get the performance right, but whether the audio was ever preserved separately is unknown. There's no official confirmation that a fully uncensored version was either saved or distributed. The idea of this version has circulated in fan circles for years, and it's fueled by SpongeBob SquarePants' fans' desire to hear this episode. In 2023, a Lost Media content creator claimed to have been in contact with someone who had access to the uncensored audio files. However, the authenticity of these claims remain unverified. Some videos claiming to have the uncensored audio have surfaced, but they've been debunked as using AI-generated voices. Essentially, it's a case of we don't know for sure, and it's possible that an uncensored version exists somewhere in Nickelodeon vaults or in someone's personal collection. But until evidence emerges, it's a rumor and rumored Lost Media lore. I've talked before that I love the idea of Lost Media. This is kind of a pretty good example of that, like this idea that this recording exists. Now, I'm not a big SpongeBob fan. I don't really care one way or the other. I don't really need to hear SpongeBob swearing. But this is sort of a good example of the intrigue behind Lost Media. Here's something that was recorded and, it existed, was never released, but was released in a different form. And the idea being there's this possibility that this, uncensored version of this exists. There's just sort of there's just something neat about Lost Media. And, even in something like SpongeBob, which, like I said, it's not something that I really need to hear. I find it pretty fascinating. Sea peoples. This term refers to a confederation of seafaring raiders who sailed the eastern Mediterranean Sea and attacked Egypt and other regions during the late Bronze Age. Their identities and origins remain a subject of debate among historians and archaeologists. The Sea Peoples wreaked havoc on the eastern Mediterranean region, but they are considered a significant factor in the late Bronze Age collapse, which, we've discussed the collapse of the Bronze Age, but it was a period of widespread upheaval and decline in the ancient world. The exact origins of the Sea Peoples are unknown. Theories suggest that they may come from various regions, including Western Asia Minor, the Aegean Islands, the Mediterranean Islands, Southern Europe. The Sea Peoples were not a single unified group, but rather a collection of different tribes and peoples. Some of the most commonly mentioned groups in the Egyptian record include Sherwood, Sheklish, Luka, Tersha, Akawasha, Peliset. I don't know what any of those groups are, but the Sea Peoples engaged in raiding, piracy, and warfare, targeting coastal cities and civilizations through the eastern Mediterranean. They were skilled sailors and warriors posing a significant threat to the established powers of the time. The Sea Peoples' attacks contributed to the collapse of several major Bronze Age civilizations, including the Hittite Empire and the Mycenaean civilization. They also disrupted trade networks and caused widespread instability and chaos. These historical entries are sort of fun because, you learn stuff that you don't really know about. I've never heard about the Sea Peoples, and I honestly don't really see a situation which I really would have because I don't really spend much time reading about ancient European history. But the idea that they have no idea where these people came from is pretty fascinating to me. Much of what we know about the Sea Peoples comes from the Egyptian inscriptions and reliefs, particularly those found in the mortuary temples of Ramses III. These sources depict the Sea Peoples' attacks on Egypt and provide valuable information about their appearances, weapons, and tactics. Archaeological findings have also shed light on the Sea Peoples. Excavations at sites like Troy and Hattusa have revealed evidence of destruction and upheaval consistent with the Sea Peoples' raids. People have been researching this and investigating this, and no one really knows where they came from, why they were like this, or what happened to them. Sort of like this lost civilization that would just sort of pop in and cause a bunch of chaos and then disappear. And we like chaos. So, Lady of the Dunes. Lady of the Dunes is the nickname given to an unidentified murder victim whose body was discovered in the dunes of Provincetown, Massachusetts in 1974. Her identity and the circumstances of her death remain a mystery despite numerous investigations and forensic efforts. The Lady of the Dunes body was found in Race Point Dunes in Provincetown, Massachusetts on July 26, 1974. For nearly 50 years, it is one of Massachusetts' most famous cold cases. A young girl was walking with her family when she discovered the body. The woman was lying face down on a beach towel and her hands had been removed, possibly to prevent identification through fingertips. Her head was nearly severed, and she had been badly beaten. Despite efforts by local and state police, the woman could not be identified. A composite sketch was created and circulated, but no one came forward with information. The lack of hands and dental records hampered identification efforts. Over the years, many theories emerged about the Lady of the Dunes' identity and her killer. Some speculated she was a runaway, and others believed she may have been involved in organized crime. The case was even linked to the notorious serial killer Whitey Bulger. In October 2022, the FBI announced they had finally identified the Lady of the Dunes as Ruth Marie Terry using investigative genetic genealogy. This is, the technique where people who did Ancestry.com and 23andMe, they're able to sort of backtrace people's identity using those things. In August 2023, the Cape and Islands District Attorney's Office announced that Terry's husband, Guy Moldovan, was responsible for her death. Moldovan had a history of violence and had disappeared around the time of Terry's murder and died in 2002. Now, this case is just sort of another one of these examples of how 23andMe is used by law enforcement to identify people. And here it identified somebody who, was not identifiable before, a victim who is not identifiable, but it also identifies perpetrators. And a lot of people don't realize that. So when you go and you do your 23andMe, you might be helping find one of your lost relatives, or you might be snitching on one of your serial killer relatives. Up to you. Well, I guess not really up to you. Up to them. The East Bay Walls. The East Bay Walls are a series of mysterious walls found in the East Bay region of the San Francisco Bay Area in California. The walls are made of stacked stones, and their purpose and origins are unknown. The East Bay Walls are sometimes called the Berkeley Mystery Walls, and they're a network of low stone walls throughout the hills surrounding the San Francisco Bay Area in California. The walls are typically made of stacked stones without mortar, ranging in height from about 1 foot to 3 feet and width up to 3 feet. They run in discontinuous sections, varying in length from a few feet to over a half a mile. Some are relatively straight, while others form angles, rectangles, and even circles. Although they're called the East Bay Walls, they are not confined to the East Bay. They can be found throughout the Bay Area hills and extend as far north as Chico and Red Bluff in Northern California. The wall's origin and purposes are debated. They don't seem to form complete composure, so they likely weren't fences. They're also too low to have served as defensive barriers. This has led to various theories, some more outlandish than others. The most likely explanation is that they were built by ranchers or farmers to clear fields or rocks to help guide or corral livestock. This is supported by the fact that the walls often appear in areas that were historically used for grazing. Some other researchers suggest that the walls may have been built by indigenous people, by Native Americans, for purposes that we don't fully understand. They could have been used for territorial markings or ceremonial purposes or even astronomical alignments. There are other fringe theories that attribute the walls to ancient civilizations, such as Chinese laborers or even aliens. However, there's little to no evidence that support these claims. I have no idea how to pronounce this one. The Dowery Who. The Dowery Who is a creature from Irish folklore and it's often described as a waterhound or even an Irish crocodile. Irish crocodile sounds like a drink. Here's what we know about it. It's typically depicted as a large, otter-like creature with dark fur and a long body and a thick tail. Some accounts describe it as having webbed feet and a mane like a horse, and it's said to be about the size of a large dog or even a small crocodile. Man, a hairy crocodile, huh? It's said to inhabit freshwater lakes and rivers, particularly in the more remote and less populated areas of Ireland. It's considered a fierce predator, known for its aggressive nature and its taste for human flesh. Legends often tell of it dragging people underwater to drown them and presumably eat them. It's considered a cryptid. We love cryptids here. Although it has not been scientifically proven, there are numerous anecdotes and stories passed down through generations suggesting a long belief in the creature. And, Irish people won't lie to you. I love cryptids. And I had never heard of this one before, but I like this idea of this Irish crocodile running around, snatching people, maybe having some whiskey in there, singing Danny Boy. Maybe this guy and the Loch Ness Monster hang out at like their local cryptid meetings. Scottish and Irish getting together. The Beast of Busco. The Beast of Busco is another cryptid, and it's said to live in the Folk Lake near Churubusco, Indiana. It's described as a giant snapping turtle, and it's become part of local folklore. The legend began in 1898 when a farmer named Oscar Folk reported seeing a huge turtle in the lake on the property. However, the story gained more traction in 1949 when several people claimed to have seen the creature. Witnesses described the beast as being enormous, with some estimations putting it at around 500 pounds, as big as a dining room table. It's said to have a shell about 5 feet long and 3 feet wide. There were numerous reported sightings of the beast in the late 1940s and early 1950s, sparking a turtle hunt that captured national attention. Despite the efforts, the Beast of Busco was never captured or definitively proven to exist. The legend of the Beast of Busco has become a source of local pride and a significant part of the town's identity. Churubusco is sometimes called Turtle Town, and the beast is featured on town signs and in local businesses. Every year, Churubusco holds a Turtle Days festival to celebrate the legend of the beast. The festival includes turtle races, a parade, and other festivities. Some believe that the Beast of Busco stories may have been exaggerated accounts of normal-sized snapping turtles. Another belief is that it was an alligator snapping turtle, which is the largest freshwater turtle in North America. Now, these things are nasty looking and they are huge. So if this was an exaggeration of seeing one of these things, I think that's probably it. People saw this giant ass snapping turtle and they're like, holy crap, it must have been like 5 feet tall or 5 feet round. I do think we need to go to Turtle Days though, in Churubusco, Indiana. I don't know where that is, but I live in the Chicago area, so it can't be that far from me. Maybe at most a few hours away. So we should go do a field trip and go see the Beast of Busco and go do, Turtle Days. I think doing like a cryptids tour this summer might be pretty fun. We could do All My Spooky People. We could go do that. The Dover Demon. The Dover Demon is a cryptid that was reportedly sighted in Dover, Massachusetts in 1977. It quickly became a famous creature in cryptozoology, capturing the public's imagination and inspiring articles, books, and documentaries. Witnesses described a small, bipedal creature with large, watermelon-shaped head, glowing orange eyes, long, thin limbs, and no apparent nose or mouth. It's said to be hairless and to have rough, textured skin. The first reported sighting was by 17-year-old William Bartlett on April 21st, 1977. He claimed to have seen the creature while driving along Farm Street. Two other teenagers, Abby Brabham and John Baxter, reported seeing a similar creature later that night and the following evening. Cryptozoologist Lauren Coleman coined the term Dover Demon after investigating the sightings and interviewing the witnesses. Despite numerous investigations and theories, the identity of the Dover Demon remains a mystery. Some possible explanations include a misidentification of an animal, which is, I think, probably the most likely solution. Others believe it might have been a hoax perpetrated by the teenagers. And some people believe aliens. Despite the fact that the Dover Demon hasn't been proved to exist, it's had a large impact on popular culture and, in the area of Dover, Massachusetts. Now, I think it's probably either a misidentification of an animal or a hoax perpetrated by these teenagers, or maybe even a little bit of both. Maybe they saw something and then they just sort of ran with it. Maybe they were just being kids and just sort of exaggerated it. Cindy James. Cindy James was a Canadian nurse who claimed to be stalked and harassed by an unknown assailant in the 1980s. She was found dead in 1989, and her death was ruled a suicide, although some believe that she was murdered. Cindy James was born Cynthia Elizabeth Hack in 1944. She pursued a nursing career in Vancouver. She was a pediatric nurse at the Vancouver General Hospital and later the Blenheim House, a facility for children with behavioral disorders. Colleagues described her as competent and professional. See, I hope my colleagues would describe me as competent and professional, but I'm not sure I would get both of those. Cindy was married to Roy Makepeace, but they divorced in 1972. I guess they couldn't make peace, am I right? However, they remained friends, and Roy helped her during a period of harassment. And Roy helped her during the period of harassment she experienced. Starting in 1982, Cindy became the target of a relentless campaign of terror. She received threatening phone calls, notes, and letters. Her home was vandalized, her car was tampered with, and she was physically attacked on several occasions. The attacks escalated in severity over time, including incidents of being bound, gagged, and drugged. Cindy reported these incidents to the police, but despite extensive investigations, no suspect was ever identified. Some officers began to doubt her claims, suggesting she might be fabricating the events or suffering from mental health issues. In May 1989, Cindy disappeared from a shopping mall. Her body was found several days later in the backyard of an abandoned house. She'd been drugged, strangled, and her hands and feet were bound. The official cause of death was ruled undetermined. While some investigators believed it was suicide, others suspected foul play. Cindy's family and friends maintained that she was murdered. The most prevalent theory is that Cindy was stalked and ultimately murdered by an unknown individual. However, the stalker's identity and motive remain a mystery. Others have suggested that Cindy may have suffered from mental illness and that caused her to fabricate the harassment and even harm herself. However, this theory is disputed by those who know her well. I think it's pretty absurd if her hands and legs were bound and she was drugged to suggest that this was self-unaliving or an accident. I think it's pretty clearly some sort of foul play, and it's pretty clear that she was murdered. So it's pretty terrible that she wasn't taken seriously by law enforcement, because that could have saved her life. Drapa stones. The Drapa stones are a collection of disc-shaped stones that were allegedly discovered in a cave in the Bayan Karaula Mountains of China in the 1930s. The stones supposedly contain hieroglyphic-like markings and tell the story of an ancient alien race that crashed on Earth. The authenticity of these stones is disputed. However, they've become a popular topic in UFOlogy and pseudo-archaeology circles. Did you know there are pseudo-archaeology circles? Well, now you do. The story is that they were discovered in a remote cave in 1938 and contained incredible details about this ancient alien crash. A Chinese archaeologist, Chi Pu Te, allegedly led an expedition that stumbled upon a cave filled with skeletal remains of small beings with unusually large heads. Alongside these remains were hundreds of stone discs, each about a foot in diameter, with strange symbols carved into them in a double spiral groove. The discs were supposedly made of granite and estimated to be about 12,000 years old. The symbols were described as tiny hieroglyphs, unlike any known writing system. Years later, a professor named Su Nui supposedly deciphered the symbols. The story claimed that the discs told the story of the Drapa, an alien race who crash-landed on Earth and were unable to repair their ship. They were forced to live among the local human population. There is significant skepticism about this story, mostly because it's riddled with inconsistencies and lacks credible evidence. No photographs of the discs in their original state exist, and the discs themselves have never been displayed publicly. Many of the names and sources associated with the story cannot be verified, and there's no record of the key individuals involved in the discovery or translation. The details of the Drapa Stone story seem to have originated from a fictional novel published in the 1960s. Therefore, the Drapa Stones are widely considered a hoax. I think this is almost certainly a hoax, but it's sort of funny that these guys tried to play this sort of fast one on everybody, like, oh yeah, you know, I figured it out. Aliens. And then, you know, people asking if we could see these things in the original state, and they're just like, no. But, you know, what do I know? Maybe we're the ones. Maybe I'm the one who is a fool. Oh boy. The Lake Winnipesaukee Mystery Stone. This is an egg-shaped stone found in Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire in 1872. It has a variety of carved symbols and a hole drilled through its center, and its purpose remains a mystery. It's about 4 inches long and 2.5 inches thick, made of a type of dark quartzite not found in the area. One side features carved images, including a face, an ear of corn, a teepee, circles, and various lines. The other has abstract symbols, including inverted arrows, a moon-shaped, dots, and a spiral. Workers were digging a hole for a fence post, reportedly found the stone. Seneca Ladd, the businessman who hired them, was given credit for the discovery. Always people like that. Always the people who front the money are always given the credit for everything, even though this guy didn't find this. The stone is currently on display at the Museum of New Hampshire History in Concord. There are a lot of theories attempting to explain the stone's origin and purpose. Some believe it was created by Native Americans, possibly as a ceremonial object, a boundary marker, or a record of treaty. Others suggest that it could be related to European settlers, perhaps as a trade token or a surveyor's marker. Others say it was a hoax, possibly carved in the 19th century as a curiosity or a fake artifact. The stone's age is unknown, and no scientific dating has ever been performed. The symbols are undeciphered, and their meaning is open to interpretation. The purpose of the hole drilled through the stone is also unclear. Now, if you ask me, it kind of sounds like this was like some sort of a thing that was put on a necklace, you know? This is a pendant that was put on a necklace, and, you know, someone found it. Doesn't seem that weird when you think of it like that, right? Just a big, and, you know, it's not even that big, 4 inches? Big pendant that someone was wearing around their neck, and they lost it, and then someone else found it, and, you know, trying to act like it's some sort of mystery object. The Woman from Lem. The Woman of Lem, also known as the Goddess of Death, is a small limestone statue discovered in Lem, Cyprus in 1878. It dates back to around 3500 BC and depicts a stylized female figure. While its purpose remains unknown, it has gained notoriety for a rather sinister reputation, a supposed curse that brings death to its owners. The statue is about 14 inches tall and depicts a naked pregnant woman with a short, outstretched arms, a high neck, and a raised head. It's believed to be a fertility goddess or a representation of a goddess whose name has been lost to time. It's similar to other figurines found in Cyprus during the same time period. The curse associated with the woman from Lem claims that anyone who owns or possesses the statue will die within 6 years, along with their entire family. Ooh, it's a gamble to hold on to that thing, huh? Now, while the curse is a good story, there's no credible evidence that supports it. And the names and details of its supposed victims are often unverified or fictionalized. It's currently housed in the Royal Scottish Museum in Edinburgh, Scotland, and there are no reports of any of the museum's staff or visitors experiencing any ill effects from its presence. I still wouldn't hang out with this thing. I don't really believe in curses and all that kind of stuff, but in the risk reward matrix, having this weird statue around you, I don't think it's very, very worth it. The Black Knight Satellite. The Black Knight satellite is a purported artificial satellite that is said to be orbiting the Earth in a polar orbit. It is the subject of many mysteries and conspiracy theories. It's said to be an extraterrestrial satellite orbiting the Earth for thousands of years, and its existence is often cited as evidence of alien visitation or advanced ancient civilizations. It's believed that this story draws from several unrelated events and interpretations that have been sort of changed and passed around from time to time. And that's what happens with a lot of these things. Someone hears a story and then someone misunderstands the story and then tells someone else. In 1899, Nikola Tesla picked up unusual radio signals which he believed were from another planet. While these signals were likely naturally occurring, they fueled speculation about extraterrestrial communication. In the 1920s, amateur radio operators detected long-delayed echoes, a phenomenon where radio signals are reflected back to Earth after a delay of several seconds. While the long-delayed echoes have a scientific explanation, they were interpreted by some as evidence of an alien satellite. In the 1950s, several newspapers reported sightings of unidentified objects orbiting the Earth. These reports, attributed to a retired Marine Corps Major Donald Kehoe, further fueled speculation about a mysterious satellite. In 1998, during the STS-88 space shuttle mission, NASA astronauts photographed a black object near the International Space Station. These images were widely circulated as proof of the Black Knight satellite. However, NASA later identified the object as a thermal blanket that had been lost during a spacewalk. The Black Knight satellite theory claims that these disparate events are connected and point to a single object of extraterrestrial origin that has been orbiting Earth for approximately 13,000 years. Proponents of this theory suggest that the government and agencies like NASA are covering up its existence. I'm on record as saying that I believe that it's impossible for there not to be alien life form. For there not to be other life form in our universe. So I believe in the existence of life outside of Earth. I also believe that if they were attempting to communicate with us, they have done a terrible job. So I'm very skeptical of any of this evidence of alien communication or alien work towards Earth, because either they don't really want to communicate with us or they're just really, really bad at it. There's no reason why, if they really, really wanted to talk to us, that they wouldn't be able to find people who are anyone else than just sort of randos that are walking around. We would be seeing them much more often, you would think. So I don't really believe, I don't really believe in the Black Knight satellite. I believe that it's probably a bunch of things that have been sort of mixed together to add to this conspiracy theory. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong. The Mantell incident. The Mantell incident refers to the death of Kentucky Air National Guard pilot Captain Thomas F. Mantell in 1948 while he was pursuing an unidentified flying object. The Mantell incident is a significant event in UFO lore, marking one of the first instances where a pilot lost their life while supposedly pursuing a UFO. It occurred on January 7, 1948, near Franklin, Kentucky, and continues to be debated by UFO enthusiasts and skeptics alike. Around 1:45 p.m., personnel at Godman Army Airport in Fort Knox, Kentucky, observed a large white object in the sky. It was described as being circular or disc-shaped and moving slowly. Captain Thomas F. Mantell, a decorated World War II pilot with the Kentucky Air National Guard, was leading a flight of 3 F-51 Mustang fighter planes. They were contacted by the airfield and asked to investigate the object. Mantell and 2 of his wingmen pursued the object, which climbed higher as they approached. One wingman broke off the pursuit due to lack of oxygen equipment for high-altitude flight. Mantell reported seeing the object and described it as metallic and of tremendous size. He continued to climb despite warnings about the lack of oxygen. Mantell's plane was later found crashed in a field near Franklin, Kentucky, and he was killed in the crash. The Air Force initially investigated the incident and concluded that Mantell had likely misidentified the planet Venus and had lost consciousness due to a lack of oxygen at that high altitude. Many UFO enthusiasts believe that Mantell encountered an extraterrestrial spacecraft and that the official explanation is a cover-up. Some have suggested that he was shot down by the UFO. This obviously remains a controversial event. While the official explanation points to misidentification and pilot error, the lack of definitive identification of the object and the circumstances surrounding the crash have fueled speculation about UFO involvement. And that's how this stuff always works. Somebody initially sees something, maybe reports it wrong, something happens, and then later a poor explanation is given, and then people assume that there is a conspiracy to cover up the thing that happened. I'm reading this, I don't really think that this was likely a UFO that he was pursuing, but the explanation that he was pursuing Venus is also very weird. So I could see how that could cause, people to doubt that official explanation. The Lubbock Lights. The Lubbock Lights are a series of unusual lights that were observed in the sky over Lubbock, Texas in 1951. They were photographed and investigated, but their origin remains unexplained. These sightings garnered national attention and became one of the most well-known UFO cases in U.S. history. The first sighting was on the evening of August 25, 1951, by 3 professors from Texas Technological College, which later would become Texas Tech University. They observed a formation of lights flying slightly overhead. They described the lights as bluish-green, arranged in a V or U shape, and moving rapidly across the sky. Over the following weeks, numerous residents of Lubbock reported seeing similar formations of lights. Some witnesses described the lights as hovering, changing direction abruptly, and even disappearing and reappearing. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence from the Lubbock Lights incident is a series of photographs taken by Carl Hart Jr., a student at Texas Tech. These photos show a string of lights in a V formation against the night sky. The U.S. Air Force investigated as part of its Project Blue Book investigation into UFO sightings. They initially suggested that the lights might be a reflection of streetlights off the bellies of birds, but the explanation was not widely accepted. The Air Force ultimately concluded that the most of the Lubbock Lights sightings were unidentified, except for one case that was attributed to radar malfunction. Now, the bird explanation is pretty terrible, I think. And I think that's where you run into some issues here. There's also another theory that these were migratory geese, but again, I've never seen geese light up. There are some suggestions that the lights were experimental military aircraft. And of course, aliens. Some have also suggested that it could possibly be ball lightning or some sort of atmospheric phenomena. I think whenever you're dealing with strange lights in the sky, it's probably something military or otherwise, aircraft related. Though the atmospheric phenomena theory also holds a lot of water to me. It could be some sort of light reflection or some sort of atmosphere reflection in the sky. Anna Baker's wedding dress. Anna Baker's wedding dress is on display at the Baker Mansion Museum in Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's said to be haunted by the ghost of Anna Baker, who was forbidden from marrying the man she loved. Visitors have reported seeing the dress move on its own. Anna Baker's wedding dress is more than just a garment. It's a relic with a tragic story, which may be why it has its reputation for being haunted. Anna Baker was the daughter of Elias Baker, a wealthy ironmaster in the mid-19th century. She fell in love with a low-class iron worker, but her father forbade her from marrying him. Heartbroken, Anna never married and kept the wedding dress she had chosen for her forbidden love. After Anna's death in 1914, the dress was placed in a glass case in her former bedroom in the Baker Mansion, which was turned into a museum. Visitors and staff began reporting strange occurrences surrounding the dress, including the dress seemingly moving on its own, swaying or even twirling within its case, despite being in a sealed environment. Others claim to have seen the reflection of a woman in the glass believed to be the ghost of Anna Baker herself. The dress has been nicknamed the wedding dress of sorrow due to the tragic story of Anna Baker and the eerie phenomena associated with it. The legend suggests that Anna's spirit is still attached to the dress, expressing her sadness and frustration over her lost love. While many believe the dress is haunted, others offer more rational explanations for the reported occurrences. Air currents or vibrations within the old house could be causing the dress to move. Reflections and shadows could create the illusion of a figure in the glass case. Also, when people think they're about to see something paranormal, they're more likely to see things that they attribute to paranormal activity. This is the power of suggestion. Now, I'm sure that a lot of the stuff that we hear about this dress, the movement, the reflections, I'm sure a lot of that is just sort of either, there's some environmental factor behind it or some sort of, misseeing things. But this haunted wedding dress in Altoona, Pennsylvania is a pretty nice story. It's a pretty good ghost story, and it's a bit of a unique one. So I think this is an interesting story and something that's worth checking out. Cohingham's Black Pebbles. Cohingham's Black Pebbles are black pebbles found on the beach of Cohingham, a small island near Koh Lanta in Thailand. The pebbles are considered sacred by locals and are believed to bring good luck. They're more than just smooth, shiny stones. They're at the center of a fascinating legend and a conservation effort. This tiny, uninhabited island off the coast of Thailand is covered with these distinctive pebbles. And the local lore says that there is something paranormal about these pebbles. According to Thai mythology, the god Taratau protects Cohingham and has placed a curse on anyone who removes the black pebbles from the island. It's said that those who take the pebbles will suffer endless bad luck until the stones are returned. Now, I know what you're thinking. Did I accidentally take some of those stones? You better check your pockets. The pebbles are black and white and have a smooth, almost polished appearance. They're not precious in that they don't contain valuable minerals, but the legend attached to them makes them significant to Thai culture. While the legend attributes the pebbles to the god Taratau, they are naturally occurring. They likely formed over time from volcanic rock eroded and smoothed by the sea. One thing that's sort of fascinating about the curse is that it seems to work, although not in the traditional way that you might think. Every year, the National Park Office that manages Koh Hingham receives packages from around the world containing black pebbles and letters of apology. People who have taken the pebbles often report experiencing misfortunes and believe returning the stones is the only way to break the curse. Now, as we've discussed, the human experience is a series of misfortunes. So I think it's more likely that people happen to be experiencing normal misfortunes and they just so happened to have taken these pebbles. The legend helps prevent the island's unique environment. People are less likely to damage the ecosystem or remove large quantities of pebbles if they fear bad luck. The returned pebbles are used to maintain the island's natural beauty, and they're often placed back on the beaches or used to create small shines. You can go visit Koh Hingham. You can go admire the pebbles, but you probably shouldn't take them when you depart, either if you believe in the curse or from a conservationist perspective. The Berkshire UFO Incident. The Berkshire UFO Incident refers to a series of reported UFO sightings that occurred on Labor Day, September 1st, 1969, in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. It gained renewed attention in 2020 when it was featured in an episode of Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries. Here's what happened. Over 250 people reportedly witnessed strange lights and a UFO in the skies above Berkshire County that night. The witnesses included families, individuals, and even police officers. The most common description was a large, disc-shaped object with bright lights. Some witnesses purported seeing beams of light emanating from the object. Several of the witnesses, including young children, claimed to have experienced missing time and strange memories associated with the event, suggesting possible alien abduction experiences or some other psychological or mental manipulation. Despite the large number of witnesses, there's little physical evidence to support the sightings. No photographs or videos of the UFOs were taken, and there are no radar records or official documentation from the time. Despite the lack of hard evidence, the Great Barrington Historical Society and some Massachusetts historians recognize the incident as a significant local event. A monument was erected in Sheffield, Massachusetts to commemorate the sightings, though it was later removed. Of course, there are skeptics who question the reliability of the witness accounts and the lack of concrete evidence. The incident's prominence in the Unsolved Mysteries miniseries has also been criticized for potentially sensationalizing the story. And of course it sensationalized the story. That was the whole purpose of Unsolved Mysteries. You know, we've talked about a lot of UFO sightings, and this could be a whole variety of things. This one is sort of a lot more vague and has a lot less concrete details. A lot of the ones that we've talked about have pictures or some form of evidence, and there doesn't really seem to be any here. So while it's completely possible that these people saw something in the air, it's also just as equally possible as that, you know, they saw planes or weather balloons or military aircraft or, you know, were just mistaken based on what they saw. You know, without evidence, you kind of have to remain skeptical. The Monster of Florence. The Monster of Florence is the nickname given to an unidentified serial killer who operated in the Florence, Italy area between 1968 and 1985. The killer targeted couples and was known for mutilating his victims. This case remains one of Italy's most infamous unsolved mysteries because of its brutal nature and the ongoing debate surrounding the killer's identity. The Monster of Florence murdered 16 people, primarily young couples parked in secluded areas. He typically attacked at night using a .22 caliber Beretta pistol to shoot the victims. He often mutilated the female victims. The killer's signature was the removal of the left breast from one of the female victims, which he supposedly kept as a trophy. There have been a significant amount of investigations involving these crimes. They've been plagued by false leads, misdirection, and accusations of police incompetence and corruption. Several individuals have been arrested and convicted, but doubts remain about their guilt, and many believe the real Monster of Florence is still at large. Some of the suspects have included Pietro Pecciani, a farmer with a history of violence. Pecciani was convicted in 1994, but later acquitted on appeal. He died in 1998 before a retrial could take place. Mario Vanni and Giancarlo Lotti. These two men, known as the companions of the monster, were convicted in 1994 for the double homicides. Numerous other individuals have been investigated and considered possible suspects, including members of a suspected satanic cult. The current most common theory is that the monster of Florence was a single individual acting alone. However, there are other people who believe that this was an organized group or cult. The killer's motives remain unclear, but the theories range from sexual sadism to ritualistic killings. I think we learned from the Amanda Knox trial that Italy's court system is pretty flawed. And it's sort of fascinating to me that they've managed to try and convict people, and yet people are like, yeah, we don't think that this is it. This is a particularly disturbing case, though, and a disturbing individual, whoever was behind these. I do feel like it's likely to me that the Italy court system might have gotten this wrong. The Cleveland Torso Murderer. The Cleveland Torso Murderer is an unidentified serial killer who operated in Cleveland, Ohio in the 1930s. The killer dismembered his victims and often left their remains in public places. The killer was also known as the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, and this case remains an infamous, unsolved mystery. There are at least 12 victims that are confirmed, although some estimates put the number as high as 20. Most were transients or residents of the city's shantytowns. He targeted vulnerable, unhoused people. The killer was known for the brutal dismemberment of the victims' bodies. Most were decapitated, and many were dismembered further, with body parts often found scattered in different locations. The majority of the victims' remains were discovered in the impoverished area of Kingsbury Run, a valley with a creek running through it. The murders occurred primarily between 1935 and 1938, although some possible related cases date back to the late 1920s. The investigation was led by Elliot Ness, yes, the famous Elliot Ness, who brought down Al Capone in Chicago. Despite his efforts, the killer has never been caught. Because of the killer's high degree of skill in his mutilation of the bodies, there is speculation that he had anatomical knowledge or experience. And almost all the victims were decapitated, and in many cases, the heads were never found. Some of the victims showed evidence of chemical treatment being applied to their bodies, possibly to preserve them or hinder the investigation. Now, there are a few suspects. One is Dr. Francis E. Sweeney, who was a doctor with a history of mental illness. He was considered a prime suspect by Elliot Ness. He was interrogated but never charged, and the murder stopped after he was committed to a mental institution. Frank DeLiesel. Frank DeLiesel was a bricklayer who confessed to one of the murders but later recanted. DeLiesel was found self-unalived in his jail cell under suspicious circumstances. Willie Johnson, who was convicted of a later murder that bore similarities to the Torso murders. Johnson was suspected of being involved but never definitively linked to the earlier crimes. The killer's identity, motives, and the full extent of their crimes may forever remain a mystery. The case continues to fascinate true crime people. I think that it's very unlikely, considering how old this case is, that there will be any definitive answers as to what happened. There's supposedly DNA testing underway to try to identify both victims and the perpetrator and the killer. But the problem is there's very little evidence. So outside of speculation, and most likely the person who was involved, or I would say almost certainly the person who did this is deceased now. So it's very unlikely outside of speculation that it will ever be known who did this. The Pauly effect. Not DJ Pauly. From the Jersey Shore. Might be dating myself with that reference. This is a humorous term referring to the anecdotal observation that technical equipment tends to malfunction in the presence of physicist Wolfgang Pauli. The Pauli effect has been named after the renowned physicist Wolfgang Pauli. The effect refers to the anecdotal observation that technical equipment tends to malfunction or break down in the presence of certain people, particularly those with a reputation for absent-mindedness or lack of practical skills. For example, I've always called this the Kenny effect whenever I'm around printers. Wolfgang Pauli was a brilliant theoretical physicist known for his work in quantum mechanics and his famous exclusion principle. However, he was notoriously clumsy and had a reputation for being a jinx when it came to environmental equipment. There are numerous anecdotes about strange occurrences and equipment breakdown occurring around Pauli, such as a cyclotron breaking down when he entered the lab, a complex experimental setup inexplicably collapsing during a demonstration he was attending, a train carriage decoupling from the rest of the train while he was on board. He remained safely in his carriage, though. He was fine. Pauli himself was aware of his reputation and seemed to believe in the effect to some extent. He once wrote to a colleague, "It is my earnest request that you do not come to Zurich for the time being. For the moment, my presence here is indispensable because of the Pauli effect." The explanation here seems to be confirmation bias, right? People may be more likely to remember and report incidences like this when someone like Pauli is present because they're more primed to believe that they're responsible. Though there's also the possibility of psychological factors, like someone's nervousness or anxiety could create people to be more, create more mistakes or clumsy, and that could cause more accidents. Now, I don't personally believe that there's a paranormal explanation to this one, but of course, it could be that certain people are, just cursed. And like I said, I think the best explanation here is the confirmation bias explanation, but, you can believe whatever you want. The Level-End UFO case. The Level-End UFO case refers to a series of UFO sightings that occurred near Level-End, Texas in 1957. Witnesses reported seeing large, egg-shaped objects that interfered with their vehicle's electrical systems. This case, the Level-End UFO case, occurred on the night of November 2nd and 3rd, 1957, in and around the small town of Level-End, Texas. Over the span of just a few hours, the Level-End Police Department received numerous calls from terrified drivers reporting encounters with bright, glowing objects that hovered near their vehicles, causing their engines to die and their headlights to fail. Witnesses consistently described the objects as being large, egg-shaped, or cylindrical, with bright lights and hovering or moving slowly near the ground. A common thread in the reports is the apparent electromagnetic interference caused by the objects. Cars, trucks, and even a police car experienced engine failure, headlight malfunctions, and other electrical problems when the objects were nearby. The most detailed accounts came from Pedro Saucedo and Joe Salas, who were driving west of Level-End when they encountered a bright glowing object that caused their truck's engine to stall. They described the object rising up from the road and approaching the truck before it flew away, after which the truck started working again. Officer A.J. Fowler, a Level-End police officer, investigated many of the reports that night. He initially dismissed them as pranks, but eventually witnessed strange lights himself and experienced radio interference while driving his patrol car. The U.S. Air Force, as part of its Project Blue Book investigation, looked into the Level-End cases, and they attributed the sightings to ball lightning and an electrical storm in the area. However, many UFO researchers and witnesses dispute this explanation, arguing that the number of reports, the consistency of the descriptions, and the reported electromagnetic effects suggest something more unusual. Now, we had talked about ball lightning in a previous one of these videos. Critics argue that ball lightning doesn't typically cause this kind of widespread electromagnetic interference. Another explanation that's been offered is an electrical storm. However, witnesses reported seeing the objects before and after the storm, and some reported no signs of the storm at all. Many UFO researchers believe the Level-End case represents a genuine encounter with an unidentified flying object, or objects, possibly of extraterrestrial origin. They point to the number of witnesses, the consistency of their descriptions, and the reported electromagnetic effects as evidence. Now, I think it's probably most likely that there was some sort of atmospheric event that caused this rather than UFOs. I don't know that if the electrical storm explanation or the ball lightning explanation is the entire thing, or if that's just, what we know about, kind of going back and looking at what happened. That said, as I've said many times, I believe in aliens, and I believe that aliens exist somewhere. I just also think that the way that these encounters supposedly are described makes me think that these are probably not actual alien encounters. The Fort Worth Missing Trio. The Fort Worth Missing Trio refers to the unsolved disappearance of 3 young girls, Mary Rachel Trelica, Lisa Renee Wilson, and Julianne Mosley, from a shopping mall in Fort Worth, Texas, on December 23, 1974. This case has haunted Fort Worth, Texas, and captivated the nation for decades. This is what we know. On the day of the disappearance, 17-year-old Rachel Trelica, 14-year-old Renee Wilson, and 9-year-old Julie Mosley went Christmas shopping at the Seminary South Shopping Center in Fort Worth. They were driving Rachel's Oldsmobile. Rachel told her husband, Tommy, that they were at the mall and planned to be home by 4 p.m. That was the last time anyone heard from her. Rachel's car was found in the mall parking lot later that day. Some of the girls' purchases were still inside, suggesting that they hadn't finished their shopping. There were no signs of a struggle. A letter, allegedly written by Rachel, arrived at her home a few days later. It claimed that the girls had gone to Houston and would be back in a week. However, the letter's authenticity has been questioned and the girls have never returned. Despite extensive investigation and searches, and even a psychic's involvement, the girls have never been found. The case remains open, and the Fort Worth Police Department continues to receive tips. There are several theories that have emerged over what happened to these girls. Some believe that the girls just simply ran away, the letter being the evidence that they decided to run away. But their families and friends insist that this is unlikely. Many believe the girls were abducted, but the lack of evidence and the passage of time have made it difficult to support this theory. There have been occasional reported sightings of the girls over the years, but none that have been confirmed. My belief here is that these girls were abducted. That's sad and that's scary. I believe it's certainly possible that they ran away, but I think it's very unlikely for 3 people to run away like that and never be seen from again. Never be heard from again. So sadly, I think there was foul play, and who knows what happened to these girls. It's heartbreaking. The Paris Catacombs Mystery Man. The Paris Catacombs Mystery Man refers to the discovery of a camera and film in the Paris catacombs in 2000. It has become a popular urban legend. The camera contained photos and videos of a man exploring the catacombs, but his identity and fate remain unknown. The footage was shot on a black and white video recorder and surfaced sometime in the early 1990s. It depicts a man exploring the catacombs of Paris. He initially appears calm, even picking up bones. As the video progresses, his pace quickens, eventually turning into a panicked run. The footage ends abruptly with the man dropping the camera and disappearing into the darkness. The footage was reportedly found by a group of cataphiles, people who explore catacombs, and it's gained wide attention after being featured on a TV show in the year 2000. Despite the footage's popularity, the man's identity remains unknown. No one has come forward to claim the footage or identify the man. No missing report matching his description has ever been filed. The most common theory is that the man simply got lost, panicked, and eventually found his way out, though this doesn't explain why he never came forward. But maybe he was embarrassed. Others believe he had an encounter with someone or something. Some speculate that there was something in the catacombs that caused him to panic, and who knows what happened. And there's always the belief that this is just possibly a hoax that was staged for effect. This was around the time that the Blair Witch Project came out, so it could have been someone trying to, do some found footage stuff. It's important to know that exploring the catacombs outside of the authorized areas is illegal and dangerous, and really, really damn spooky. I think it's probably most likely that this was either some sort of a, some sort of a prank or some sort of ARG or viral marketing campaign. Or the guy just got out and just doesn't really want to be known as this guy. Frank Hayes. Frank Hayes was an American jockey who died in 1923 after suffering a heart attack during a horse race. Incredibly, his horse, Sweet Kiss, continued to run and won the race, making him the only deceased jockey to ever win a race. On June 4th, 1923, at Belmont Park in New York, Frank Hayes rode a horse named Sweet Kiss in a steeplechase. Sweet Kiss was a long shot with the odds of 20-1. Despite this, the horse won the race. After the race, it was discovered that Frank Hayes had died of a heart attack during the race. His body remained in the saddle as Sweet Kiss crossed the finish line. This is probably a pretty good thing to keep in mind for some sort of bar trivia. Like, yeah, there is a jockey that won a race while dead. I don't know. I'm not much for horse racing. I don't know that many people are. The Chicago Tylenol murders. Kind of surprised to see this one this low on this list. This deep in the iceberg. But the Chicago Tylenol murders refers to a series of poisoning deaths that occurred in the Chicago metropolitan area in 1982. The victims had all ingested Tylenol-branded acetaminophen capsules that had been laced with potassium cyanide. The case remains unsolved. 7 people died. The victims were Mary Kellerman, who was 12 years old, Adam Janis, who was 27 years old, Stanley Janis, who was 25 years old, Teresa Janis, who was 20 years old, Mary McFarland, 31, Paula Prince, who was 35, and Mary Rayner, who was 27. The deaths occurred over a few days in late September 1982. The incident caused widespread panic and led to a massive recall of Tylenol products. It also had a significant impact on the way over-the-counter medications are packaged, leading to the introduction of tamper-evident packaging. Despite a large-scale investigation, the perpetrator has never definitively been identified. James William Lewis was considered a prime suspect, but he was never charged with the poisoning. He was later convicted of extortion for sending a letter to Johnson & Johnson, who are the makers of Tylenol, demanding money to stop the killings. The Tylenol murders led to the tamper-evident packaging that you now find on basically every single bottle of pills that you can buy over the counter. This is a tragic event. This is an important part in American history because first, it started creating corporate responsibility for these products, both in the tamper-evident packaging and the different ways that these types of pills were packaged in order to keep people safe. But another interesting part of this is that Johnson & Johnson and Tylenol's response to this incident is considered the gold standard for product recalls and how a company reacts to a defective product. And now well-run companies follow the blueprint of Johnson & Johnson in their reaction to this case. There have been theories that John Wayne Gacy or Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, were the perpetrators of these crimes. But there's no specific evidence tying them to those crimes. Those are only theories. Dorothy Jane Scott. Dorothy Jane Scott was an American woman who disappeared in 1980 after attending a company meeting in Anaheim, California. Her remains were found 4 years later. She was a young single mother and was the victim of this tragic unsolved murder. However, her case is known for the phone calls her mother received from her killer after her disappearance. On May 28, 1980, Dorothy drove 2 of her coworkers to a hospital after one of them was bitten by a spider. While waiting for a prescription to be filled, she went to move her car closer to the entrance. She was never seen alive again. In the months leading up to her disappearance, Dorothy had been receiving disturbing phone calls from an anonymous male stalker. After her disappearance, her mother, Vera Scott, began receiving phone calls from a man claiming to have murdered Dorothy. The calls were disturbing, revealing details about Dorothy's appearance and last moments that were not public knowledge. In 1984, 4 years later after she went missing, Dorothy's skeletal remains were found in a remote area in Anaheim Hills. Despite the disturbing phone calls and the discovery of the remains, the identity of Dorothy's killer remains unknown, and the case is still considered open, but it's gone cold over the years. This case sort of seems prime for someone to figure out who it is sort of after the fact through sort of DNA evidence or the 23andMe DNA evidence, but we'll see. The Hall Mills murder case. The Hall Mills murders case, it refers to the murder of Eleanor Reinhardt Mills and Edward Wheeler Hall in New Brunswick, New Jersey in 1922. The case involved a prominent Episcopal rector and a member of his choir, and it became a media sensation. The Hall Mills murder case is one of the most infamous unsolved crimes of the early 20th century. Edward Wheeler Hall was an Episcopal priest at St. John the Evangelist Episcopal Church in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Eleanor Reinhardt Mills was a member of Hall's choir. On September 14, 1922, Hall and Mills were found dead in a secluded lover's lane near a farm in Franklin Township, New Jersey. Hall was shot in the head, and Mills was shot and had her throat cut. The scene suggested a love affair gone wrong, with evidence pointing to a possible struggle. Frances Noel Stevens Hall, who is Edward Hall's wife, is the primary suspect, with jealousy being her main motive. Henry, William, and Mary Stevens, who are Frances Hall's brothers and sister, are suspected of helping her sister commit the murders. The case went to trial in 1926 with intense media coverage. Despite the strong suspicion, Frances Hall and her brothers were acquitted due to lack of sufficient evidence. The case remains officially unsolved. This case became an early or one of the first media circus cases in crime reporting. The case was also a scandal because it involved an affair between a clergyman and a married woman. It's sort of interesting that there isn't much about Mills's husband and whether he was involved in this case based on my research. But I think that might be a good place to look. But, most likely either the husband or the wife, right? Missy Bevers. Missy Bevers was a fitness instructor who was murdered in Midlothian, Texas in 2016. She was found dead inside a church where she was preparing to teach a class. The case remains unsolved. Her case has received national attention due to the unusual circumstances of the case. On April 18, 2016, Missy Bevers arrived early in the morning at Creekside Church of Christ in Midlothian to prepare for a Camp Gladiator fitness class she was leading. She was found dead inside the church with multiple puncture wounds. Surveillance footage from inside the church showed an unidentified person in what appeared to be police tactical gear walking around the hallways before Missy arrived. The person is considered to be the prime suspect in the murder.
Recorded on surveillance video, roaming the halls of the church with a distinctive gait and dressed in police-style garb.
Despite extensive investigation and the release of the surveillance footage, the police have been unable to identify or apprehend the killer, and the case remains unsolved. Now, the surveillance footage here is pretty weird, and so I see why this is such a popular case. It's also sort of fascinating to me that even though this occurred just 8 years ago, in 2016, that they're not able to figure out who this guy was. And I think now it would be much easier to figure out who this individual was for a variety of reasons, based on the vast amount of cameras that are available and the other types of techniques of identifying people that have sort of emerged since then. So while this case seems really recent, technologically speaking, it was from a different time. The Carol A. Deering. The Carol A. Deering was a 5-masted schooner, or a ship, that was found run aground and abandoned off the coast in North Carolina in 1921. The ship's crew was missing and their fate remains a mystery. The ship was built in 1919 in Bath, Maine by the G.G. Deering Company and named after the owner's son. In 1920, the Deering set sail on a commercial voyage to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, with a crew of about 10 men. On January 31st, 1921, the Deering was spotted aground on Diamond Shoals off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, a notoriously dangerous area known as the Graveyard of the Atlantic. When rescuers boarded the ship, they found it completely deserted. The crew was gone and there were signs of a hasty departure, but no clear indication of what happened. Many theories have emerged to explain the disappearance of the crew, including a mutiny, piracy, an attack by pirates, storms. Severe weather could have forced the crew to abandon the ship. Or paranormal activity. Maybe ghosts did it. Now, these old maritime cases are, particularly spooky because the ocean is scary and spooky, and who knows what could have happened to these people. They could have had some sort of mass hysteria event. They could have been taken off and taken out into the ocean and never seen again. It's hard to know. It's hard to know when you're dealing with the ocean because the ocean is so vast and powerful, and who knows what could have happened to these people. High Brazel. The High Brazel is a mythical island said to appear off the west coast of Ireland once every 7 years. It's described as paradise with lush vegetation and advanced civilization. It started appearing on maps as early as the 14th century and persists in Irish folklore. The most distinctive nature of the High Brazel Island is its elusive nature. It was said to be shrouded in mist, only becoming visible for 1 day every 7 years. Even then, it remains unreachable. It's typically depicted on maps west of Ireland. Its exact location has varied, though. Some maps have placed it southwest of Galway Bay. It's described as a lush, fertile land, sometimes said to be inhabited by advanced civilization or even gods and goddesses from Irish mythology. In some stories, it's home to magical creatures like large black rabbits. On many of the maps, the High Brazel is drawn as a near-perfect circle with a central channel or a strait running through it. The name High Brazel is believed to be derived from the Irish meaning descendants of Brazel, a high king in the Irish mythology. Legends tell of voyages to High Brazel by figures like St. Brendan and Berend, who return with tales of the paradise-like island. There were also reported sightings of the island throughout history, further fueling the myth. High Brazel's appearance on maps for centuries, even by reputable map makers, contributed to the belief in its existence. This reflects when geographical knowledge was incomplete and myths and legends were often intertwined with cartography. Has to have been kind of wild to be making maps and having no idea what you were making. Now, this is just sort of a fun story. I think it's pretty clear now with the satellite imagery that this island doesn't actually exist. But it's sort of fascinating to think that, during this time, centuries ago, people would try to make maps and places that weren't real made it onto these maps. And it sort of shows you how misinformation was legitimized in earlier times. Cadaver Synod. Cadaver Synod was an event that took place in Rome in the year 1897. Pope Stephen VI had the corpse of his predecessor, Pope Formosus, exhumed and put on trial. The corpse was found guilty of various crimes and was mutilated and thrown into the Tiber River. Hate to be the lawyer representing the corpse, huh? Your Honor, my client smells terrible. Pope Formosus was Pope from 1891 to 1896. He was only Pope for 5 years. Wow. His papacy was marked by political turmoil and conflict. In 1897, Pope Stephen VI had Formosus' body exhumed, dressed in papal vestments, and placed on trial in the Basilica of St. John's Lateran. Formosus was accused of perjury, usurping the papacy, holding multiple bishoprics simultaneously, which was against church law. The trial was obviously a spectacle. He was found guilty and his papacy was declared invalid. His acts were annulled, and the fingers of his right hand, which were used for blessings, were cut off. The cadaver synod caused widespread outrage and further instability in the papacy. Stephen VI was eventually overthrown and imprisoned, where he was unalived. Later, Pope Theodore II reinstated Formosus and had his body reburied with honor. I have no idea how they found it after they threw it into a river, but wild. Just what a wild thing to occur, and it sort of shows you that these wild power struggles are not new. It just seems to be part of human nature to do this kind of insane stuff. The Indus Valley Civilization. The Indus Valley Civilization was a Bronze Age civilization that flourished in the northwestern region of the Indian subcontinent from 3300 to 1300 BC. It was one of the largest and most advanced civilizations of its time, known for its urban planning, sophisticated drainage systems, standardized weights and measures. The Harappan language was used by the people of the Indus Valley Civilization remains undeciphered, despite numerous attempts by linguists and archaeologists. Well, the civilization was primarily in what is now Pakistan and northwest India, and it featured very sophisticated urban planning. Cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa featured grid-like layouts, advanced drainage and sanitation systems, and well-built brick structures. The IVC also engaged in extensive trade with Mesopotamia and other regions, exchanging goods like pottery, textiles, and precious stones. The fascinating thing, though, is its writing, its language, is undeciphered. And, there are people who study their whole lives. There are people who have studied their whole lives to figure out language and learn how to solve languages, and no one's been able to solve this language. That's fascinating. Caspar Hauser. Caspar Hauser was a German youth who appeared in Nuremberg in 1828 with a mysterious past. He claimed he was raised in isolation. He had limited social skills and very limited knowledge of the world. He claimed to have spent his entire life confined to a darkened cell. His story and death sparked controversy, making him one of the 19th century's most famous unsolved mysteries. On May 26, 1828, a teenage boy appeared in the streets of Nuremberg, Germany. He carried a letter addressed to a captain in the local cavalry regiment. The letter claimed that the boy had been kept in confinement since childhood and had only recently been released. The boy could barely speak or walk, and his mental development seemed severely stunted. He could, however, write his name, Caspar Hauser. Hauser claimed that he had been kept in a dark cell his entire life, with only a straw bed and a few wooden toys. He said he had been fed only bread and water, and had never seen another human being, and his story attracted considerable public attention. And it became the subject of fascination. Many people wondering where this guy came from and why he was confined the way he was. There are a lot of theories about his identity, including that he was a member of the Baden royal family and had been hidden away to prevent him from claiming his birthright. On December 17, 1833, Hauser died from a stab wound in Ansbach. He claimed he had been attacked by a stranger in the park. The circumstances of his death have also been mysterious, as no one knows why he was attacked. It's hard to know because of how old this case is, how true the story is. Nearly 200 years old. But if he was raised in total isolation like that, that's terrible. This is just an example of child abuse, and that's a heartbreaking case. All right, everybody, we did it. That is tier 4. The end of tier 4 of this Iceberg series. We have 2 more tiers to go, tier 5 and tier 6. I will be working on tier 5 soon. We'll have that video out soon. Make sure that you're following me on Blue Sky and TikTok. My username is AKBruise. Follow me on Twitter if you're not following me there. My username is AKBruise there also. If there is a spooky, disturbing story you would like me to cover, send me an email. My email is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. I appreciate you watching my videos. I appreciate your support. So thank you for watching. Please make sure you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like, subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications, all that. And, of course, stay spooky.